How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Bitcoin Magazine Live. This is episode 38, and we've got a packed episode today, starting off with an interview. Casey Carrillo of Bitcoin Magazine is going to be interviewing Texas Slim of the Beef Initiative. Casey, if you want to take it away.
Yes. Before we begin, everyone, I want to see you in Miami, April 6th through the 9th at the conference. I want to shake your hands. I want to invite you to meet the plebs in person. So I'd be, excited to see you all there. Get your tickets. I believe we have a discount code YTMAG. Can use that, get a little percentage off. And it'd be great to see y'all there. But without further ado, I have an excellent guest today. So much interesting things to talk about. But welcome to the show, Mr. Beef Initiative, Texas Slim.
Hey, Casey, how you doing today? Thanks for having me on, man. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Absolutely. Ever since you gave us that article, I was, looking to do something more with it, maybe get some more word out. So, before we jump into the focus of the article and such, why don't you just introduce yourself, tell us how you got into Bitcoin, and just sort of your Bitcoiner story.
Sure. It's kind of interesting how I got into Bitcoin because it basically helped launch me looking deeper into the food apparatus that we know. I come from Texas. I've many generations. My ancestors were all agricultural ranching. And so I've always been around food a lot, but what I never really did was dive deep into the intelligence of how our food is basically grown anymore, how it is processed, and how it's delivered in the market access of our nutrition. So I'm pretty rough and tumble guy. I got kind of beat up about 2 years ago. I had some physical stuff. I didn't get beat up, but I just got hurt. So I was laid up for a while. And I started looking into Bitcoin. I'd seen it, we get into it when we deserve. I got into it late, but as I was laid up, I was getting into Bitcoin, but I was also diving deeper into the food because I was having to watch what I was eating. I was like, hey, let's revisit food. And it just took me down a rabbit hole that was symbiotic with each other. And so I'm a big researcher and an analyst. That's what I come from. I learned a lot of skills in Austin, and most of my adult life was in Austin working in startup companies. So I started leveraging my intelligence that I'd kind of gained as far as the skill set. And I embedded myself in a harvest company this past year, and I started meeting people. I started researching the companies that were providing the products as far as the pesticides, the herbicides, the grain that we grow. And it just led me down a rabbit hole into further into Bitcoin. The further I got into food, I was using the decentralized mindset, the ethos that we all strive for. And I started writing about it. And then here we are today. And a lot of things have transpired since I did that.
Absolutely. Getting knocked down and getting back up with Bitcoin, you can't beat that, really. But
it was a godsend, being on my back for 6 months. What are you going to do? You're going to low time preference to survival, to education, to knowledge. And so it was a gift.
That's an excellent mindset to definitely to getting knocked down. Let's talk about the Beef Initiative, which is your project. And can you just tell us what it is, why it's important?
Well, whenever I did the Harvest of Deception, we bring up seed oils, we bring out all the poison that we're eating and consuming as people and civilians in the United States. I wanted to create a solution because you never go into something and parrot the problem daily forever. Well, if you're going to complain about something, you're going to identify an issue, you better have a solution that you can present to people. So being from Texas and knowing Texas history and around pure animal protein and the cow itself, I said, well, let's create something called the Beef Initiative, where we're going to get back to local communities, hyper localization, and leveraging everything we can in a decentralized way. Well, that was the cattle industry in the state of Texas from day one, and you can do a lot of comparisons. So I said, well, let's get the Beef Initiative going. Let's go talk to ranchers and educate them about Bitcoin, because they've already been living a decentralized life. That's what they know. So let's bring the philosophy of Bitcoin into it. Let's bring that protocol into the conversation. Let's bring that new store of value that they don't understand. And by educating the ranchers into Bitcoin, the ranchers are educating us on what pure animal protein is again. And so we're looking at the protocols that they use to basically raise their animal protein, as far as, if it's regenerative, if it's what products are they using, what types of style of ranching or grass farming that they're doing. And we bring that into the conversation, and we all try to get to a better way of sourcing our pure animal protein. And so it's evolving, and it's evolving very fast, because we're discovering things about our food industry as far as market access. Who controls the market access of our nutrition? Who has the processing capabilities to process our food, be it animal protein or if it be the grains? We don't know a lot of this stuff, and it's covered up in ways that, people trust, because our food industry has become a big marketing plan. And that's all it is. I call it a global marketing plan, because there is an effort to basically keep us, as far as, civilians, citizens of the United States, in the dark of what true food is. And it uncovers a lot of lies. So we're educating the public what food intelligence is again. I tell people to look at their grandparents and see how they ate, or their great grandparents, because they ate in a very different way from us. And you look at the history of the United States right now, 78% of us are either obese or overweight. 1 out of 2 of us is either diabetic or pre-diabetic. 46% of kids between 5 and 11 are now obese or overweight. That's an issue. And people aren't really looking at how is this happening? Well, we're going to break it down, and we're going to give you a solution. And therefore, we're going to let you be able to source your animal protein in a way that that people don't see coming. It's going to be decentralized. We're going to take out the centralization of our food supplies. And we're basically striving to become the new beef industry in the United States. And we're going to do it with the Bitcoin, protocol.
Absolutely. So sort of taking the idealistic, decentralization of Bitcoin and then applying it to ranchers. I am curious, you mentioned that a sort of like symbiotic relationship of knowledge between Bitcoiners and ranchers. And I think a lot of Bitcoiners could envision how Bitcoin could help ranchers. Can you describe like how ranchers could help impact the Bitcoin community and some of the practices they could teach us?
Well, if you look at ranching from the day one, they're based on community. They're based on different forms of communication. They know manipulation of markets, of commodity markets, of futures markets, of grain prices, everything that they have to battle every day. I tell people you get a fourth generational rancher that's battled the last 40 years, and what he's seen as far as trying to be able to be a productive rancher in his community. He knows some things that Bitcoiners don't understand. So that rancher is going to say, this is really the truth about our food supply, and you're going to understand this, Bitcoiner, because you're not seeing this aspect of the food supply that is highly captured and is something that you're not even aware of. But now that you're bringing this Bitcoin store of value, whatever we want to call Bitcoin, everybody calls it something different. Well, you're teaching me something I've already known, but now I get to take it to a new level. You're sending me down a rabbit hole. I'm going to send you down a rabbit hole with food. You're going to send me down a rabbit hole of Bitcoin. And they work hand in hand. Once you start seeing that correlation of our food in the centralized aspect of the industrial food complex, and we look at the money supply and the Fed and the central banking system and how it is corrupt on a centralized level, it's all the same. If you're talking money, you better be talking food. If you're not, then you're missing something here, and it has to be symbiotic. And the rancher and the Bitcoiner can actually bring that clarity to a lot of people's understanding.
Yeah, like the parallels between the problems with the centralization of the money system and the food system seem very related. They seem almost the exact same thing, just in different iterations. So, sure. Bitcoin, like you said, is sort of like the latest technological iteration of the decentralization that's been in practice in ranching for a long time. Sure. But moving on, I guess one question I would ask is, what's the most important thing for people to understand about our food supply today?
Like I said before, our food supply it has nothing to do with nutritional value. That is the last thought that we come to as far as the corporations that are designing our food systems and processing our food. Once again, it is a marketing plan. It has no basis of truth anymore. You look at how they're basically pushing the fake meat products now that they are. We look at where is the motivation coming from? Well, they're trying to basically outlaw the cow. They're making a carbon hazard. And so by the manipulation of what food truly is, and as far as what pure animal protein can do for our nation and our body, this is how we got here. We didn't get here with processed food. We got here, our strength laid and is the foundational truth that our strength as a nation came from animal protein. You cannot contest that fact. And so what we do as far as bringing that education to everybody, it's something that if you understand the manipulation in the marketing plan, what the food industry is about and how highly subsidized our food industry is, then you're going to start seeing that there's a lot of cracks in the labeling, in the education of what food really is, as far as calling something organic, using grass-fed as a label. Well, those labels are, to this point, are manipulated in ways people do not understand. They don't understand that there's 1,000 chemicals this year that's going to be added to the food supply. The FDA won a lawsuit in October of 2021, and basically it's under the GRAS rule. That's something called generally recognized as safe. If the FDA says that basically it is safe, they can put that chemical in your food supply. They don't have to tell you what that chemical is. And so why are they introducing 1,000 new chemicals into our food supply this next year? Now you look at our food, we can't pronounce the names of those on the labels anymore. Nobody can. Nobody understands what they're consuming anymore. You look at what are those chemicals? Those are fake commodities that we are basically being forced to ingest through our food supply system. Where do those chemical companies come from? Well, they come from companies like Bayer, Monsanto, Cargill, the people that are manipulating our seed into a genetically modified organism. Well, now they're not even going to start using genetically modified organism, GMO, that it's going to be bioengineered. And people don't understand that. What is bioengineering? Well, let's introduce nanoparticles. Let's introduce all these kind of new chemicals that you are going to be ingesting. A lot of those new chemicals and particles that we're going to be ingesting is now going to be the new fake protein delivery that they're trying to orchestrate and engineer for people to understand that, hey, this is better than the cow. It's an orchestrated effort. They're coming after our food supply in ways that people don't understand. Look at the health of our nation. Look what just happened in the United States in the last 2 years. Our health is compromised. And so let's look at why. Well, it's because our food supply is compromised because our dollar has lost its value, especially since 1971 when we went off the gold standard. Once we went off the gold standard, our dollar was devalued, our food supply was devalued. Why do we have, if you look at pictures from 1970 to 2022 of our nation as a whole, you can find unlimited representation of how unhealthy we have become as a nation. Why is that happening? Well, it's because of our consumption model. And it's an industrial food complex that is designed to basically make food a marketing plan with low nutritional value.
Right. It all comes back to the cheapening of the money, right? So the incentives get misaligned.
Yeah.
And then we end up with an industry where, like you said, we built this country off of animal protein, but if you incentivize cheaper and cheaper food, animal protein becomes unsustainable. One thing I wanted to bring up, though, a common misconception is that we might just be talking about processed food. Can you talk about how this is a bit more systemic and it comes from something like as fundamentally basic as the soil, which would affect every part of our food chain, not just something that's processed, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, starting with the soil, I always say we got to get to the source of the seed. If the source of the seed is the issue, well, the source of the seed usually takes growth within that soil. And throughout especially the last 50 something years since 1971, we went to something called monocropping. And what we did, monocropping, Eric Butts was part of the Nixon administration. And he said, hey, we're going to go big or go home. What did that mean? He goes, well, you're going to go fence to fence now. And that's whenever we introduce pesticides, herbicides, genetically modified seeds into our food system. Well, what did that mean? It meant that the farmer, he couldn't do 4 to 5 crops anymore. He was going to go fence to fence with one crop. And he was going to use this type of pesticide or herbicide to grow that food. Well, those chemicals throughout the 50 years, and this is a whole different podcast. You go from the chemical company that designed Agent Orange during Vietnam is the same chemical company that designed Roundup that we've been using the last 50 years. And so as we've killed our basically metabolical health, we've killed our soil too. And a lot of people don't understand what soil is. They just say it's dirt. But as far as our soil is concerned, the chemical companies that have been growing our food for the last 50 years have destroyed the soil in a way that a lot of people do not understand. We don't have a lot of sustainable soil that we can use anymore. That's whenever we look at soils, like how can we regrow our soil? And that's when the regenerative conversation comes in. And we're saying, this is what we really need to be looking at. We don't need to be looking at this centralized form of monocropping, pesticide, herbicide type of system that has gotten us here. But the same people that are starting to try to control the regenerative aspect of our soil are the same ones that destroyed the soil in the first place. That's why they're taking animal protein out of it. They're saying we can build all your food in these labs. We can do stem cell growth of animal protein. We can have the fake meat products that are done with soy and pea protein, which is basically poisonous in my eyes. And a lot of scientists believe this as well. There's so many things that we're not talking about, but it does start with how do we rebuild our soil as a nation?
Right. And I mean, I think we can even reframe like the environmentalist perspective, right? From going like we need to reduce carbon emissions to we need to take care of our soil, right? Like that is our environment, and the environment is what produces our food for us.
Of course. I mean, that's how the carbon problem that they're trying to orchestrate as far as, everything's moving to a carbon credit economy. And a lot of people, they don't understand what that means. Well, it means you're going to be a bad citizen if you eat beef, and they're going to say, oh, that cow, he's a carbon hazard. So, as far as, saving the planet and, everybody that's a lot of idealistic people are thinking that they're pointing their compass in the wrong direction. And how we save the planet is getting land tools back on our soil and our grass and let them basically regrow our soil. And let's get this carbon problem, under control with the land tools that got us here from the very beginning, from the bison, just how our great grasslands in the United States, how they were formulated and protected for thousands of years was because of the land tools that were on them. And that was the bison.
Right. I think, nowadays we have a problem of trying to modernize every problem that we have, right? Trying to take some advanced technology and address the issue, when a lot of the times the answer lies in the past and what we used to do and how humans have taken care of the earth for thousands of years prior to all this technology.
Well, we get too smart for our own good. My grandfather was the smartest man that I'll ever meet. And most of everybody that is listening to this could probably look over their shoulder and say, that's the smartest person I ever knew. I just didn't realize it. So let's look back at them. Let's leverage what they knew, because they really, I always tell my grandmother and grandfather, they had a party line system in which they communicated. They decentralized their whole life. They fed their community. They fed their neighbors, and their neighbors fed them. That's what everybody talks about in the Bitcoin world. There's so much that we can learn if we look back over our shoulders and said, that's where the intelligence was. Let's leverage that historical value of how they got to where they were able to let us evolve to where we are now. Let's quit trying to be so modern day smart, because this is a small problem. If you look at the history of humans and just in the nation, United States, 50 years is a very small, a, a grain of sand in the time of space that we've been consuming and evolved. So what was the last 50 years? That's all we really have to look at. We don't have to get any more crazy than that. And it's pretty easy to break down that we were doing it right not too long ago. We can get back there pretty fast.
I think that's like a hopeful thing to hear. I think like a
Sure.
lot of times it feels like we're fighting battles that just will never get resolved within our lifetime, at least.
Mhm.
So it's excellent to hear that at least one of the more pressing issues, I think, could be resolved if we were to take these ideas and sort of spread them as quick as possible. Jumping off that, though, we've identified this problem. What are some steps that everyday people, Bitcoiners, people listening to the podcast, what can they do to sort of reclaim their food sovereignty as we described?
Yeah, I focused, and it's very simple for me. I grew up eating pretty good food, and I've always eat crap food just like we all do. But one thing is we get to status about food. We make it so freaking black and white, and it's not a black and white issue here, man. Each individual is going to have their own experience, their own basically place they are in the consumption model that we live in. You don't have to be overly crazy. You don't have to worry about diets and all kinds of things that get shoved down our throats that never work. They're on a scale of a fiat scale. Every 13 months, there's a new diet plan. Every 13 months, there's something else. And then every 13 months, people are doing it all over again. The hamster wheel of consumption is just amazing. So let's just get basic with it. I start and I tell everybody, just get rid of the freaking seed oils out of your life. That's it. Try it out. And I guarantee you that one little quick little move is canola oil or whatever seed oil that's out there. If you eliminate that and you pay attention, intentional decision making, saying, I'm not going to consume, let's say, soy oil, canola oil, or any other type of seed oil. And it'll be a gradual process. But if I'm very aware and I'm looking at these labels, I guarantee you're going to go down a rabbit hole and you're going to say, man, I need to look at how I'm delivering my protein in my nutrition to my body a little bit closer. And this can be a gradual process. You don't have to worry about diets. You don't have to go out and have a major workout plan. All you have to do is be intentional about looking at a label. I don't shop at the grocery store anymore. Maybe twice a month I'll go to the grocery store. Everything else I'm sourcing locally. So with the Beef Initiative, we're bringing people back to their local protein sources, and we're creating market access to saying, I'm going to go meet this rancher and I'm going to shake his hand. I'm going to say, thank you. How can you help me? And how can I help you? And you're going to have a conversation. So cutting out seed oils, and let's go find your local rancher. If you don't have a local rancher, if you're living in the middle of Boston or Manhattan, that's okay. Come to the Beef Initiative, and we're going to give you a database that you're going to be able to search, and you're going to be able to find a way to source your protein. And you're going to eliminate walking down those middle aisles at the supermarkets. You're not going to need seed oils anymore, and your diet is going to change naturally and holistically. You're going to create a new kind of lifestyle that you didn't realize that is as easy as it can be. Everybody says it's more expensive to buy from a rancher. It's not. I spend less money now than I ever have on groceries. I eat twice a day. I eat so much protein every day. I'm never hungry. I don't think about food in the way that I used to when I was eating this highly processed food apparatus. And it's something that, man, I just want to scream from the rooftops that it's not that hard to do. And Bitcoiners are very intentional. We're very proof of work driven. This is a small amount of proof of work that if you put into your basically consumption model, as far as the content that you're allowing into your head, as far as what is real nutrition and what we know is real nutrition, your life will change pretty fast. And there's a lot of people jumping on board. And I'm, within the Beef Initiative Come tell us how you mine your protein. Write an article. We'll publish it for you so you can share it to the other Bitcoiners. If you have a good local rancher that you're already proven, that's proof of work, come to the Beef Initiative, put your producer into there's a page in there where you can put your local rancher. Talk about your local rancher and his protocol and how he's raising his beef. We're creating a big collective conversation right now. We're crowdsourcing all the intelligence that the Bitcoiners have, and we're sourcing all the intelligence that the ranchers have, and we're bringing everybody together. And I can't tell you how many groups I have on Signal and Telegram that we got 3 or 4 ranchers talking to each other, then they're talking to Bitcoiners at the same time. This stuff is about to take hold, and they're learning about each other, and they're educating each other, and everybody's getting healthy as they're doing it.
Right. I mean, so to reiterate, the Beef Initiative is really about connecting beef producers, ranchers with beef consumers, eliminating the middleman, and then, extracting the benefits from that situation and spreading it further. And I think we're really poised to adopt and really want this. Like, people really have a distrust of things right now. I think people are learning more about their food supply, more about what they're eating, just because people are doing more research online about things. And I think this, like the Beef Initiative, is really a way for us to regain that control over the food supply. Was that fair to say?
I'm thinking big here. It started out like Texas Beef Initiative, and it's like, no, this is bigger. This is not about borders. This is a global thing. And it's kind of right now, it's like, it's not a production company, but what it is creating a conversation that everybody's wanting to have. And what we're doing is we're coordinating that conversation, and we're connecting some nodes. We're building some nodes out. We're building some really good, powerful, like local communities again. And the only way you build community is through your food source. I mean, that's it. If you don't have a food source in your local community, you don't have a community. And so by leveraging the spirit that's going on as awareness, and people are awakening to, this type of issue within our food supply, giving that solution of like, let's facilitate this in a way that we all know how to do it, because we're going to show some proof of work. We're going to onboard each other into a new lifestyle that a lot of people in the centralized world do not understand. And that's our power right there. And then it is happening. I haven't talked much about this, but I've been putting a team together for a good while now. It's been over a year, and we're in the state of Texas. We have a lot of laws and a lot of things that we can leverage as far as animal protein processing. So we have a very good model for processing facilities in the state of Texas that can scale pretty large on a global level, or I'm sorry, on a national level, but also on a local level. We're going to become a processing association consulting advisory board through the Beef Initiative. I've built the team. I got the green light just last night. And so people are going to come to us in the state of Texas. They're ready. They're already lined up. There's a lot of capital out there saying we're going to change the processing industry in the state of Texas. So by saying that, in the year 2022, most people in the state of Texas, I'm going to encourage most of them to come to the Beef Initiative, because we have a team of people that will be able to facilitate you getting through the regulations, getting through the inspection process, building out the facilities to the USDA. We have precedents. We have a lot of things that I don't think it's ever been put together. So I'm pretty excited about it. There's going to be some new news coming out in the next month or so, how we'll approach that, how people can approach us, how we can vet you on a financial level, on your intentions, on your local communities. We're going to build a plan where if we build a processing center and we help you build that processing center, we're going to propose that you give 5% of that back to your local community so they can educate people about what food is again, about the young people in that community, where they don't have to go to the big cities anymore. They can stay in that local community, and they can be part of the processing of the food for that local community. So there's a lot about that is about to be released as far as that information. And that's going to be pretty powerful. A lot of people will be able to advise other states and saying, hey, these are the rules and the laws of your state. This is what is in Texas. Let's look at that and see how we can get your local communities involved, just like we're doing in Texas.
Yeah, Texas Slim, if I can jump in here real quick.
Sure.
It's awesome. I love everything that you're saying and building out a team. Have you guys built out a plan for, I guess, countering attacks, or what attacks do you see on you guys? I mean, right now in Canada, we're seeing obviously attacks on people's money in the banking system and Bitcoin in general. Aside from attacking the money, do you see other ways that they could attack you guys, whether it's eminent domain to try and take your land, or shutting off the servers for Beef Initiative itself? I guess if you want to give any insight on that.
That's going to be very interesting, because I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of ranchers. I've talked to ranchers where their cattle were not seized, but their bank accounts were seized because of certain things. And you follow the money, of course, and it goes straight into corruption. So they always are worried about the money getting seized. And the more they learn about Bitcoin, and the faster they do, they're going to be very happy for that. As far as being attacked, it's going to be interesting, because they're not going to be able, they can attack us. But I like to tell people that we're going to know the law better than the law knows itself now. A lot of the regulations and the laws that we follow within our food industry, our government, really, our local governments, our state governments, and our national governments are very detached from each other. There's a lot of indecision, but the type of intelligence that I'm bringing into that aspect of it, they can attack us, but we have USDA precedents, we have federal precedents, we have state precedents, and we have local county jurisdiction precedents. That's not something a lot of people can say. So as far as them attacking us from that perspective, it's going to happen. I'm not too worried about that. Let's look at technology. We're going to have to build basically a platform system that is decentralized, and using everything that's being innovated in the Bitcoin space. I'm looking at weekly saying, hey, what's going out there as far as innovation? I'm going to have a podcast with Jimmy Song pretty soon. I want people to start looking at, hey, how can we help the Beef Initiative to stay decentralized, where they can't censor us, that they can't take us offline, that we're not part of AWS and they can shut us down because we're getting too much leverage into the food conversation, because they're marketing it very heavily right now. There's documentary after documentary coming out that dairy cows are, now horrible, and we torture dairy cows. Just the amount of deception and propaganda that's about to hit this year is going to be massive, because they've spent hundreds upon hundreds of millions of dollars for this fake meat industry and these fake commodities that they're going to start pushing on everybody, saying that it's saving the planet. There's cracks in anything. We'll see how they come after us. I'm going to be very public and very transparent. So it's not going to be a big attack. It's just going to be solution driven. And if they want to just talk about our solutions, sit down at the table with us and tell us what we're doing wrong, because we're going to be able to have the conversation exactly straight back at you too. So here we go. Bitcoin exposes everything. So I'm not too worried about that.
Oh, definitely. I think we could even consider like what you were describing with the attacks on the dairy industry and things like that as more of like a subversive type attack on the Beef Initiative, even if it's indirect. But luckily, people hunger for this right now, just like they're hungering for Bitcoin. I think there's like this feeling within people that there's something more to the system, why they're getting sort of dragged down, and I think the Beef Initiative sort of fills that hunger in the same way that Bitcoin does, just for food instead of money. But we've sort of touched on so many things here that could, be coming out of this. Would you just describe, maybe beyond the Beef Initiative, what the primary change you want to see come out of the adoption of Bitcoin?
People are walking around in a haze right now. There's a lot of brain fog in this world. And one thing and this is, like I said, this is not a judgment. This is not about a diet. This is about your spirit. This is about your strength. as a person, as a parent, as a young man, a young woman in this nation, there's a solution right in front of us. And the more we look down this rabbit hole of Bitcoin and the adoption starts coming forward, we're going to win because we're sourcing our minds with the best nutrition that is available on this planet. You can't argue with that. If you want to argue with that, I encourage you to please keep eating your chicken tendies and your hot pockets, and just try to stay up with us, because we're going to win, because our minds are powerful, our bodies are strong, our spirit is, based, and we're coming from truth. I mean, you can't argue with that. I've got a couple of years on you guys. One thing you do understand, you get a little wise, you say, I'm doing it right, and I'm not going to let people get in the way of that. And that's what the Beef Initiative is. It comes with the strength. It's the Beef Initiative. It's from damn Texas. We're going to stand toe to toe with anybody. And we got some fortitude. We've got some history. We got some legacy. We got some heritage. We got some tradition. I want all the Bitcoiners to bring that type of energy into this fight and start fighting for your food, and quit treating it as entertainment. It can be entertainment, but from a pure stance. And that's, that I have no doubts that's how we win in the long run. We'll be stronger than anybody else. And once we hyper localize our food systems, I I go down, I talk to my local producer every 2 weeks. Okay. I shake his hand. We're good friends. My freezers for my whole family are full of beef right now. I'm eating for the next 2 years. I have no stress that the rest of the world's talking about right now. I I don't have to participate that. That allows my mind, my body, and my spirit to go deeper into innovation as everybody else is parroting the issues at hand right now. I'm not worried about that stuff because we're in the solution right now and we're living in the solution. And I think Bitcoiners are going to start understanding that they can do that on their own individual level, in their state, in their region, in their county, in their town, wherever it is where they need to start. They're going to get empowered pretty fast, and we're going to work together to do that.
Yeah, I am curious there on a note.
Mhm.
Do you, in the short term, do you foresee issues in the beef supply? You talk about
Oh, sure.
stockpiling. Do you see it being difficult to find producers, or are you referencing mostly like grocery stores? I'm just curious.
The way I see how this playing out, and nobody knows. I mean, we all act smart, but if I had to make a prediction, I think that right now what's going on with the food supply systems, just look at Canada, how they're shutting and how things can shut down overnight. Joe Rogan and Adam Curry brought up the facts. It's like Manhattan can get cleaned out in a day and a half to 3 days of all food. Okay, well, that's not that hard to orchestrate a short-term food supply shortage. So how are they doing it already? Well, they're inflating the price of beef and saying that there's not enough cows. Well, that's a lie. Well, they say it's because of COVID. Well, that was orchestrated by them. So the amount of a manipulation that has been going on with our food supply is big, and I think that we will see a short-term food supply. What I know that they're trying to do for a fact is turn beef into caviar. When they do that, they eliminate a lot of people being able to purchase good animal protein. Well, what are they going to supplement? Well, these new fake commodities that they're engineering into our systems. They're engineering into our mindsets right now. So yeah, I believe that they are going to attack the beef this year. I think that, it's always been attacked. And this is nothing new, but it's on a new scale. It is ramping up. I would say you don't even put yourself in that position right now. Be very intentional. Show some proof of work that you're going to be serious about how you're going to eat for the next 6 months and take care of it. It's not about MREs. It's not all that. Just whatever you can do as an individual. There's ways to do it that all of us can use and share as a solution. And it doesn't have to all be beef either. It's animal protein. It's, whatever lamb. I'm bringing a lot of people that, sheep farmers. We're bringing in pork. We're bringing in fowl. There's just so many ways that you can source your animal protein let's not even pay attention to the distraction. Something's going to happen. I'm not even thinking about it anymore because I'm secure, and that's what everybody else needs to be too. And once we're secure, and the world is falling apart around us as far as food supplies, we're going to be able to innovate even faster, because in times of prohibition, and this is what people really in the Bitcoin world need to understand, in times of mass prohibition creates mass innovation. That is our responsibility as Bitcoiners. This is why we're in this game right now. We don't need to keep on bringing ourselves down with all the negative news about food and all that. We need to be the change, and we need to be the distraction. And we have the ability to do that because we're pretty based.
Yes, we are pretty based, I think. I mean, to speak to your point, admittedly, I'm not connected to the beef initiative, which I need to be now that I've learned more about it. But
Sure.
So I purchased my beef from the grocery store, and in the last year alone, the prices have so dramatically changed that my consumption has changed. I've had to choose cheaper cuts of beef more often than I would like. I used to eat a lot of really nice fatty ribeyes, and that has,
Sure.
I'm doing that a lot less often now because they're $30,
Yeah.
and it's incredible how this, something as simple as like a 15% inflation increase can change people's diets and therefore their foundation of their health.
There you go. I mean, and this has been happening for 50 years in ways people don't understand. This is the most current model of making a young man as yourself eat less of what you should be eating. That makes you less powerful. You fight less. You're empowered less. There's so many things that happen across the board whenever you have had to change your consumption model. One thing that a lot of people don't look at, I like to paint the picture in the long term. The more we adopt Bitcoin as far as the store of value in the beef industry, the more basically the beef goes down in price. The more that the supermarket beef goes up, the local rancher goes down. And you'll start seeing that within probably this year, next year, within the next 3 years. We won't have problems with the prices of beef because we'll have a store of value that's being leveraged that they didn't understand, especially the last 3 years, and how the inflated beef prices have started affecting us as a nation. So there's a lot of little things in there. Let me give you an example. I call it the modern day cattle drive, and to give you some understanding about how this happens. There's a bunch of cattle down in Brazil. Okay. They get driven to Mexico. Mexico finishes off with a lot of different types of grains, and a lot of grains that, we'll just say that they're not the best of grains. That cattle then goes into Texas. Texas processes that cattle. Well, they get to say, hey, that's USDA stamped. That's good old premium beef. Okay, well, it's not the best beef in the world, but guess what? Texans have to eat that beef. All the cattle that was raised in beef, 1 million cattle a year get sold, and Texans never have any access to that cattle. And so we're eating subpar beef as we're shipping our damn good beef across the seas. People don't know that. You're thinking you're getting local beef, or you're getting something that's in the United States. Not even the United States. It goes through a lot of touch points before you even get to consume that now very expensive piece of beef. So there's so much you need to learn about sourcing your beef locally with very few touch points. And you talk about the expensive cuts. We all love the sirloins. There's 3, 4, 5 different cuts of a cow that you never have access to because it's used in different ways through the industrial food complex. If you're talking to that local rancher, you're saying, I want all of that cow. I want to leverage the oxtail. I want the tongue. I want the shank. I want the Denver cut. I want the Kansas City cut. I mean, there's so many different types of parts of the cow that we don't even know that we can use. Let's talk about the bones, getting you the bones whenever you get a quarter or a half a cow. There's a lot to leverage within that, to where you're going to eat differently, and you're going to eat even more like based. Basically, right now you're having to compromise. Once you start sourcing from your local rancher, you're going to step up your game even more that you don't even realize at this point in time.
No, absolutely. I recall reading about Safedine has talked about this before, where you can, when I go to the grocery store, I pick up this little prepackaged thing in a little plastic wrap that's just the cut. And like you said, I mean, there's so much to the cow that we're just not even seeing. That does play an important role in our health and nutrition that we could be consuming, but just it's not, being created that way. So, I mean, moving on here, there are so many interesting things happening in the Bitcoin space. What's something that's coming up soon or you're looking forward to in particular here?
Well, I've been kind of quiet as far as how are you going to be able to use Bitcoin to purchase? Like right now, we just launched the Beef Initiative. It's kind of a soft launch, but people are finding out more about it. We're offering beef boxes from K&C Cattle there in Austin, and it's Cole Bolton. We're good friends now. I reached out to Cole very, very early on. So we designed to say we need to get beef to the Bitcoiners, and they need to be able to purchase it with Bitcoin. Not everybody's going to separate themselves from Bitcoin. That's another, conversation, but we need to bring the Bitcoin into beef discussion and beef into Bitcoin discussion. We thought this was the perfect entry point. What I like about what we've been able to do is partnership with the Oshi app. And they're about to do a major release finally. And they've been onboarding a lot of different merchants across the United States, and especially down in Austin. And so the ease of use of transactional Bitcoin is going to be here pretty quick, and you're going to be able to buy beef with Bitcoin. And so that's the most exciting thing that I've really been focused on, to tell you the truth, because it's been a long journey and it's been very fast. And all of a sudden it's about to get pretty powerful. And what's cool about using and partnering with the Oshi app, if you go out and find Casey, if you find your local rancher and you go out there and shake his hand, you go to the Beef Initiative, you're going to download the Oshi app. Okay. Well, if you onboard that rancher onto the Oshi app and he starts making transactions with the Oshi app, because basically there's a rewards program within the Oshi app. Every time he makes a sell as that rancher or local animal producer supplier, whoever it is, and they use the Oshi app and you onboarded him, you're going to get sats back on every purchase that is ever made through that rancher. So you're going to have incentive models that you don't see coming. That rancher is going to get sats back. He's going to be able to offer things to his customers that he's never been able to do to. So there's a lot of new information that's about to come out with the Oshi app, how to onboard through the Beef Initiative with the Oshi app. And I think we're going to have a lot of guys driving around the country trying to onboard ranchers here pretty fast.
Heck yeah, I think so. I mean, the incentives exist, and I think Bitcoiners want to buy their beef through that.
Why not? So. But well, that's the thing about you. You look at the rancher; he has to pay 2.7% on his credit card transaction fees. Okay, rancher, you don't really have to do a lot with Bitcoin, but just keep that 2.7 transaction fee in Bitcoin, and come back in 6 months and see what that has done for you, and start leveraging that. Get your mindset into that. And once they start understanding that, and they have the ease of use of transactional with the Oshi app and the software that we're providing to them, man, this is a snowball effect that's about to start happening. And once coffee shops, all the restaurants across Austin, and when they're all using the Oshi app, you go to a restaurant and you say, hey, where do you get your beef? Well, our rancher is on the Oshi app, or that restaurant on the Oshi app. You get to onboard every touch point of your food anymore. People need to look at it like that. How many places is my food coming from? Well, it's coming from my local rancher down to this steakhouse and me. And all three of us are partners now because we downloaded the Oshi app and we're all getting sats back. That's never been done before.
I love that you said, like, we're all three partners now. Like, that's how the food chain should exist. The rancher benefits from the steakhouse that's buying his beef, and then the customer can go in and be satisfied knowing that chain isn't disturbed at any point. I mean, that's excellent. Real quick here, I got to tell everyone, if you're not going to Miami April 6th or the 9th, what are you even doing? Like, you're going to want to be there. make sure to use the code YTMAG to get a nice percentage off your ticket purchase. But ticket prices go up, I think, in 2 days. So you best be getting those tickets, man. I mean, I want to see y'all there. But Texas Slim, if people want to get involved in the initiative, they want to, work with you, help you, how can they connect to you and how can they get involved?
The best way right now, we on Twitter, we have @Beef Initiative is our handle. And then of course mine is @ModernTMan. I've been really open about if you want to schedule a meeting with me just to discuss, there's a calendar that you can sign up. I want to talk to everybody. I want to hear everybody come in. And we're trying to accommodate all of the input that's coming in. I want everybody to go to the Beef Initiative, go to Mine Your Protein section. Tell us about how you mine your protein, write it, and then we'll approve it and we'll post it, and everybody in the Bitcoin space can read about it and we can have feedback. We can start that conversation. If you know your local producer, if you know a producer across the United States that you use, go to the producer section of the Beef Initiative, put your producer in there and help them out. Let them get some exposure. And once we start that, we create a new algorithm around, the conversation that we're going to be having this year. One thing that I want everybody to know, we're having 4 conferences this year across the United States. And they're going to be the Beef Initiative conferences. And we're starting off in Kerrville, April 23rd, 24th, and 25th. We're going to have speakers there. Marty Bent's going to be speaking. Adam Curry's going to be speaking. Cole with KNC Cattle is going to be speaking. And we're going to have 2 or 3 more speakers. And it's all going to be combining basically everything that we just discussed this last hour. And we're going to do that across the United States now. And a lot of people are going to start paying attention, come to them, and start meeting people in the food industry in ways that hasn't been done yet, and this is how we decentralize that conversation.
Yeah. Distributed Beef Initiative, folks.
There you go.
But it's at Beef Initiative on Twitter, at Modern T-Man for Texas himself. And I mean, is there any questions that I didn't get to ask you that you want to talk about, Texas?
No, I mean, I think it's a broad discussion, and I really do appreciate just kind of kicking it off. It's a good general based knowledge of understanding, hey, this is where we start. Let's work together. Let's not be a bunch of, there's a lot of people in the space that want to point that, like I said, this is not black and white here. We're going to start the conversation. We're all going in a good direction here. And it's about decentralizing our food system. And it's not about being a carnivore or a vegan either. This is about pure produce, pure animal protein, pure nutrition. This is what we need to be talking about. We don't need to be pointing fingers at each other and having all these fights. That's the distraction. We don't want to parrot the distraction. We want to become the solution, and we are the distraction now. And if we have that mindset, the truth will come out, and everybody will be a lot better off for it, especially in the Bitcoin space.
Yep. The foundations of food, we're gonna fix them, folks. We're gonna get it back to where we were. But thank you so much for joining me, Texas. It's really been an excellent conversation, and I hope people reach out to you.
Man, I appreciate the exposure. Everybody come along for the ride. This is a 10-year plan, just like what they're trying to do to us right now across the globe with the, with the COVID, everything. This is a 10-year food plan, and we're going to do it one step at a time. And so let's do it together. Let's be based. Let's show some proof of work.
Heck yeah. And we all get to have some really good steak while we're at it.
You're damn right. Let's get started.
Heck yeah. Well, thanks again, Texas. Everyone, thank you for joining me for this excellent episode of Meet the Plebs. Again, I better see you in Miami in April. I mean, I gotta shake your hands, guys. So get your tickets, YT Mag. And thanks again, Texas. See y'all later.
Appreciate you guys. Take care, buds.
Thanks, Texas Slim, and thanks, Casey. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, and then I'm going to be interviewing Jameson Lopp of Casa. So we'll be back in a short second. Talk to you later. Welcome back, everyone. I have the pleasure of interviewing the co-founder and CT of Casa, Jameson Lopp. Jameson, thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
It's a blast to have you here. So for the people that missed the episode with Andrew or at eCurrency, he was on a couple weeks ago. Can you describe to our listeners what Casa is, what their platform is, and what they're trying to do?
Sure. I mean, what we're really trying to do is what I've been focused on for 7, 8 years now, which is bringing the promise of being your own bank to the average person. So we're just trying to make self-custody as simple, straightforward, user-friendly, and also bulletproof, especially against foot guns and the user basically screwing up, because there's a million ways you can screw up. And we do that using a variety of technologies, but nothing novel. We're basically using various standards and technologies that are a part of the Bitcoin ecosystem, things like multi-sig and hardware devices for key management. And we put them all together in one nice package with a slick mobile app interface on top of it. Let that help you basically manage your keys and your self-custody. And along with that, you're also providing a high level of service so that if you are new, if you do encounter some weird edge case, then there's someone there to help you, so you don't have to send an email and wait for 3 months and hope that a customer support person will eventually respond to you.
Yeah. You've obviously been in the space much longer than me. I'm the class of 2020, so I consider myself a very new Bitcoiner. I haven't lived through a full halvening cycle or a 4-year cycle. So when did you get into Bitcoin, and what made you develop and start Casa, and when, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I've been a Bitcoin enthusiast for a decade now, and it was just an interesting side project hobby for me for several years, where one of the first things that I did was actually fork the Bitcoin core repository and added in a bunch of statistics and metrics and data collection, just trying to expose more data for developers and other people in the ecosystem to better understand like what the Bitcoin nodes were doing. And after a couple of years of just going to meetups and talking to people on Twitter and forums, I went full time in 2015 and started building infrastructure for BitGo, where we were basically helping enterprises secure their hot wallets. And after doing that for 3 years, I did a small pivot and helped co-found Casa, where we're using some of that same technology, like multi-signature technology, and bringing that to the retail user, the average pleb, so that they can start to self custody and really be confident that they can do that, because I think that's one of the big pieces of friction that's resulting in a lot of people still leaving their keys and their coins with third parties, is that they feel like it's safer to trust the experts to take care of that rather than take on the responsibility of doing it themselves.
Yeah, I mean, if the Canada Freedom Convoy isn't proof of that enough, trusting experts or other people to hold your money, I don't know what else is. So I guess, can you take me through the process if you're a pleb and you're just wanted to self-custody your keys, but with the guidance of you guys, what would the process be like?
Sure. I mean, we have an entry level product that ends up being about $10 a month, but really all you need is at least one of the popular hardware devices, whether that's Trezor, Ledger, Cold Card. We're also rolling out support for some of the animated QR code based devices, and those are a bit more expensive, but I think the user experience is totally worth it. And just go sign up. We've got a free trial you can also check out at keys.casa. It's keys.casa. And it's really just a matter of following the instructions in the mobile app, plugging your device in, or doing the QR code setup. And we make it a pretty seamless process to get yourself into not only what would be considered a cold storage setup where your keys are offline, but a distributed multiple key setup so that you're essentially eliminating single points of failure by having your keys in multiple different locations with multiple different types of security.
Yeah, that's excellent. I know you guys have already addressed this, but I'm not sure what the answer is. How do you guys remove yourself from the equation as a point of failure if you guys were to become compromised, or you were forced by a government entity or a corporation to basically go against your users or your customers?
Absolutely. Yeah. If we were a single point of failure, then we'd really be no better than any of the other exchanges or, Bitcoin banks, as it were. And that's one of the first things that actually happens when you finish your initial setup with Casa is you receive a personalized email that is a step-by-step guide to what we call the sovereign recovery process, which is basically what are your options of if for any reason Casa ceases to exist or stops responding, becomes unreliable, how do you take your existing keys, your hardware devices, and the small amount of information that you need to know really to reconstitute that setup? And you can do that in multiple other types of Bitcoin wallets that are totally unrelated to Casa. We have no control over them. Using them does not rely on any Casa infrastructure. And that's one of the big benefits of us not doing anything novel, and us using standards, using third-party manufacturers that are widely used across the ecosystem, is that as a result, there are a number of different wallets out there that follow the same standards, and you can essentially import your keys and other data into, so that you can then manage your funds in a worst case scenario, even if Casa stops working for some reason.
Yeah, that's a really important point. I guess I want to start transitioning. I know you wrote an article back in November called, I believe it was called "To Swat a Swatter." I'll post it in the chat for our platforms, but I guess, can you take us on this long journey that kind of goes about security and safety without giving out? I guess I don't want to give out details of the perpetrator, which you kind of outline in the article, but can you talk about what happened? I think a better part of 5 years ago, and then ultimately what the conclusion was.
Yeah, so I guess it was it October 2017? It has been over 4 years. When I had an incident where essentially my entire neighborhood got shut down by police. And it didn't take too long for us to uncover that it was essentially a swatting call, or a prank phone call, as it were, but one that happened to say the right words, which triggered a lethal force response from local law enforcement because they thought that people's lives were in danger. So essentially someone claiming to me calling my local law enforcement and saying that I had killed people and had hostages and bombs and all this other stuff. And so thankfully that situation ended. It ended without incident because I wasn't even home at the time, and I ran into the police blockade trying to get to my house. And this was obviously fortunate, and if not for that one thing, it might have ended differently. But this actually, and I have several really long blog posts that go into all the details, but that's actually an interesting point of operational security that I brought up, which was that when I post things, I try not to do it in ways that would give away exactly what I'm doing or where I am at the time. And what I believed happened that morning is that I posted something at probably 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning, talking about it being Monday and it was going to be a long week. And I suspect that that's when my attacker saw that and said, "Oh, he must have just gotten out of bed. So that was the perfect time to swat him." But in fact, I was already on the other side of town at the gym, because I'm a really early riser and like to work out early in the morning. And so it just so happened that they thought that that was a great time to swat me, and it ended up not being a great time. But fast forward a year or two, basically I announced that I had been swatted, but didn't really say much more about the details for nearly a year, because I spent the next year basically tearing down my entire life and rebuilding it with a focus on privacy. And I felt like one of my goals was I wanted to be able to go after the attacker without worrying about more attacks against myself. And also, I didn't want to have to completely give up my identity and my reputation that I had already built up around it and start all over again. In order to protect my privacy. So, from a privacy perspective, I kind of took the hard route there because I wanted to keep using my real name, and yes, it is my real name. Unfortunately, I was not smart enough, a decade ago to think about creating a pseudonym. Um, and so then it turned into really like a 4-year long ordeal of talking to private investigators, talking to a number of different attorneys, collecting tips, eventually talking to the FBI, but it took like 3 years to ever get someone at the FBI's attention. And that was also just sort of fortuitous networking connection. And after many years and handing over all the information I collected to the FBI, it took them almost a year after receiving the information to get back and say, "Hey, we found the guy," and uh, unfortunately, the federal district attorney has declined to prosecute because they're a minor, and they just apparently, the federal system doesn't really have good justice or enforcement when it comes to minors, and so they usually just sort of get off. Um, and so we thought it was all over at that point, but then a few months later, the state district attorney actually came to us and said, "Hey, we are interested in prosecuting." And at that point, things happened pretty quickly. The guy in question didn't contest anything. He pled guilty to all the charges. I actually ended up flying out there and giving my own witness statement. And he basically got probation and a handful of other terms that he has to follow by for the next few years, since he did not have a criminal record. So it was a kind of a weird conclusion. Like I really I had hoped that it had been an adult who should have known better and been able to take responsibility for stuff. But I get it. I think we all do stupid stuff when we're kids. It's kind of crazy that we're at the point now where, due to advancements in technology and certain times when law enforcement and the justice system can't keep up with it, you can have these really weird asymmetries. So, some like 14-year-old kid who knows a little bit about tech, just enough to be dangerous, is able to actually have lethal force arbitrarily pointed at really anybody that they want, because very few people have sufficient privacy to prevent you from being able to find their home address. And then that ends up being so difficult to have law enforcement even care enough to try to track them down. And then even when they do track them down, the justice system isn't really prepared to do much about it if they're just a young kid without a record. So it's a very interesting and complicated long case, and I'm just glad to finally have it behind me now.
That's wild. There's so many threads I want to pull on here. I mean, especially because I'm the Twitch project manager as well as the producer for this live stream. Swatting
Yeah.
is a pretty common occurrence. I won't say pretty common, but it's more well known in the gaming community. When you're playing video games, you're most likely
That's really where it started out, and then it sort of branched out into other things, and now like celebrities and politicians, and now like anybody who pisses anybody off enough should worry about it.
Yeah, definitely. So like for my point of view, it's definitely an area that kind of worries me if, this can happen to quite literally anyone. So it's definitely an area that I would want to improve on. What would you recommend for a person to start, since you kind of went on this 4-year long manhunt and trying to hide your identity yourself? It can be an overwhelming or daunting task. Where would you recommend a Bitcoin pleb start with trying to improve their privacy and security to start off the bat?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest thing, and what I should have done, but in hindsight, it's hard to predict that you'll go from having a couple dozen people following you to having hundreds of thousands of people as an audience. But of course, that's the other thing that I think people need to understand. In the communications age, you might be a pleb today, but tomorrow, if you say or do the right, or in some cases the wrong thing, then that can attract a level of attention that you're simply not prepared for. You can essentially become a micro celebrity if you go viral. And if you then have the attention of hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions of people attracted at you, then it's just a numbers game that some of them are going to be deranged and or willing to do things that could cause harm to you. So really, I see it more as like anyone who participates on the public internet needs to worry about this potential edge case, because you don't know when you might hit the lottery, as it were, and go viral and have too much attention. And so from that perspective, like, one of the easiest things to do is just not use your real name. I mean, there's obviously benefits to using your real name, but if you think of security and privacy as complementary, then I consider privacy to be like the outermost layer of good security. And if you can prevent an attacker from even being able to target you in the first place, then it doesn't really matter what the rest of your security is. Though you should have good security, you should have many, many good layers of security regardless. But the further out in the layers of security and then privacy that you can stop an attacker from coming at you, the better. Essentially, the safer you are, the more easily you can sleep at night. So, if you are participating in discourse on social media or other public forums, especially if you're in a sort of fringe or political space where discussions can get very heated and people might get angry, that is certainly a situation where I recommend using a pseudonym that can't be tied back to you. Other than that, there is really no limit to how much time and resources you can put into improving your privacy. I think the most important thing for people to understand is that it's not an all or nothing thing. It can certainly feel overwhelming, especially if you start to read some of the articles I've written about the extreme privacy things that I've implemented. But if you do want to start going down that rabbit hole, there's a ton of good resources. I have a privacy resources section on my website. Bitcoin.page will get you there. Though I would say the kind of privacy Bible, at least for Americans, is going to be Michael Bazel's privacy guide, which you can find on Amazon for around $40. And he's been coming out with a new edition of that almost every year, and each new edition adds like another 150 pages, so I think it's up to like 400 or 500 pages at this point. And it talks about every possible aspect of your life and how you can implement better privacy for it. But you don't need to go to the extreme that I did, which is creating legal entities to own all of your property. Also, that is something that is very jurisdiction specific. It's hard to do outside of America. But you can do things like use a VPN. It doesn't take more than an hour or two for a new person to figure out how to set up and install a VPN. Install ad blockers, same thing. That'll help protect you from just sort of everyday corporate surveillance that happens as you're going around the internet. And I can tell you from experience, because in my pre-Bitcoin engineering life, I worked for a marketing company, and my job was to essentially write analytics jobs that were being run across these huge clusters of data sets with hundreds of petabytes of raw tracking information that were being collected from things like email campaigns and website visits and whatnot. So there's a ton of data that you just leave strewn about the internet as you're going about your daily life, and everything that you can do to minimize that footprint or obfuscate it and make it look like something else is going to be good.
Yeah, I think Jimmy Song said, in the United States, we're addicted to free. So that's why, the Facebooks, the Googles, the YouTubes, I know they're owned by the same company, but all of those things that offer free services, but basically you become the product. Obviously, they're selling your data and they'll take anything they can get, to marketing, to advertising. I mean, just Google, you can look up Google AdWords, you can look up trying to run a marketing campaign on Facebook, and you just see the prices. I think that saw numbers recently. I think it's like $150 per person per day. Maybe that's too much, but basically it's like some absurd amount of, basically they're pricing what it's worth to sell a campaign to this subset of a population. It's normally $150 per person, which is chum change to a lot of these big tech companies. But when you think about it in terms of other businesses, they're just selling your privacy and your data, which is pretty absurd. I
Yeah, if
guess
you don't pay for it, you're the product.
it,
And that's actually, we have a very strong privacy policy at Casa that you can read on our website, where we have extreme limitations on what we'll do with any data. And more importantly, is the fact that we just don't collect much data. All you really need is an email address to get set up with us. And of course, we happily recommend people just like create a new Proton Mail or Tutanota or whatever privacy preserving email address for that.
I was going to say, I think you guys even have a service that you can do it pseudo anonymously. Obviously, I guess it would be tied to a bank account, or I guess you guys would accept Bitcoin, and then you could
Yeah.
use another email to do so, to pay for that.
Yep, definitely accept Bitcoin. We do have data purging policies within our commerce mechanisms as well. But if you really want to be paranoid, then you shouldn't trust, because you can't verify whether or not we've purged any data. But if you pay us in Bitcoin, you know that we don't have address or other financial, like personal identifiable information on you.
I know, I don't know if you guys do this, but by any chance, do you guys do a coin join as you accept Bitcoin payments? I know that's something that Francis kind of took to the extreme, because he interpreted the law with Bull Bitcoin, that anyone that sends Bitcoin to his exchange, he coin joins, because he said it's in order to protect his customers' privacy. Obviously, with everything going on with the Freedom Convoy, I'll see if they are going to try and go after him or Bull Bitcoin in general to get that information. But I know that he said that it's in the best interest of privacy of them and their customers.
That's a good question, which I'll have to look into on our BTC Pay server. I'm not sure offhand if that's possible to do if your BTC Pay server doesn't have the private keys readily available, because
Okay.
I think that has a more interactive protocol. But the answer is no for right now. But I definitely should go look into it and see what the requirements are to enable pay join offers, basically.
Yeah, I didn't mean to get you guys, but I know that was something that he did, which I thought was very clever, and I think it'd be cool for other businesses to implement going forward. So I guess a question that I have from someone at the company is, what do you think the biggest fault is that someone can prevent in general in regards to security and privacy?
Well, it's tricky, because it's like, are we talking about the most common thing or the worst possible thing, right? There's a whole spectrum. So like I said earlier, the most common thing, or the easiest thing to prevent against, is just normal day-to-day corporate surveillance. When it comes to like your regular day-to-day privacy and security, I mean, it's going to sound lame, but really, I think one of the biggest things that people fail to do is just use a password manager to make sure that they are generating unique passwords. Like, most people that I know have a handful of passwords that they keep in their head and they reuse them everywhere. And that's really the best way, I think, to guarantee that you're going to get pwned at some point, because um, it's really the same type of problem with using credit cards, is that you're going out, you have this little bit of sensitive information, whether it's a password or a credit card number, what other, banking information. And as you go about your life, you're interacting with hundreds, if not thousands, of third parties. And every time you have some sort of interaction with them, you're giving them this private data. So essentially you're just sowing your private data all over the internet, all over the world. And it's only a matter of time before one of those third parties gets compromised. And it doesn't really matter if they get hacked by an external hacker or if they have an internal like rogue employee that siphons off all the data or what. It doesn't matter. It's just, once again, sort of a law of large numbers that over a long enough period of time, that data is going to end up in the hands of an adversarial entity. So what do you do to mitigate that risk? Well, you don't reuse data. Just like you shouldn't be reusing Bitcoin addresses when you're receiving funds, you preferably should not be giving um, your credit card data to everybody. You should not be giving the same password to everybody. That way, if and when that data gets compromised, it's limited. It's siloed to that one service or to that one credit card. Um, People may be confused right now of like, well, how do you not give your credit card to everybody? Well, that's where you need to use virtual credit cards, or prepaid debit cards or whatever. Like I really like the privacy.com service. There's at least half a dozen other services out there that do the same thing, where you can essentially, just like with a password manager, generate a new credit card that then gets locked to that one merchant. So, and you can even put limits and other security mechanisms on it. So that's what I think it comes down to, like understanding how to silo off these different pieces of sensitive information so that it's okay if they get compromised. It's not any different than one of the major things that we use at Casa when we're thinking about architecture, which is single points of failure. If you're using the same password everywhere, if you're using the same credit card everywhere, if you're using the same private key everywhere, it becomes a single point of failure. And so that's why, once again, like with Casa, with having a distributed multi-key setup, we did that because we understand that people are human, things happen, edge cases happen, and you need to build a system. You need to build preferably every aspect of your life in such a way that a failure is tolerated and can be easily recovered from. And you don't want a failure to be potentially catastrophic.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. And even to your point of like reusing data, I think all people or the majority of people are guilty of this. Use the same passwords, whether they're your birthday, your last four digits of your social for your PIN, constantly reusing the same passwords. And I know as the hackers get the information, they get smarter too. If they can tie my name, my identity, and my email together, they're going to start using, okay, this is a password that was used in a different database. This is his birthday. This is his PIN, like last four digits of social and stuff. I guess, what are ways that you kind of avoid, I guess you kind of brought it up there, but even perfect example, I'm moving right now, a way to kind of try and increase my privacy. They kind of went hand in hand. It wasn't, I'm going to do this for more privacy, but it just kind of worked in my favor. But when I was going to set up my internet, surprisingly, you call them, you say what kind of internet connection you want, the router, the modem, all that. And they were asking me for my
They wanted
social
a credit check, didn't they?
Yeah, they are not even that. They wanted to do my social security number. And I literally stopped them and I said, I'm not giving you that information. And the person just kind of like stopped in his tracks. And he was like, oh, okay. Like, why not? I'm like, because I don't feel like giving that information. And we just kept going on with the transaction, which was fine, which is the irony of it all. But yeah, he was asking for some really private information that I didn't want to give. And luckily for my new home setup, I have a separate mailing address compared to my actual address. So I was okay with giving, the PO box or whatever I have as my mailing as the address of the location I'm going. But it was very weird. Like he asked for, the social security or the credit. Yeah. Social security number and stuff. So in a way that's more and more surveillance. What are ways that you combat that?
Yeah, so that's also that that's one of the things that can be awkward, especially when you're new to trying to be more privacy conscious, is you start to recognize all of the times that you interact with third parties and they ask you for information that's just not necessary. And obviously they're doing this for marketing purposes, or in the case of various like utility and services companies, they're doing it to protect themselves from bad credit customers that don't pay their bills. Um, on the service side, I found most of the time that you can bypass credit checks if you offer just to make a deposit. I will pay you up front. I will give you enough money that you don't have to worry about my credit worthiness. Um, when it comes to a lot of other merchants, or especially it's those face to face or phone or interactions, the real time stuff that's more awkward because they ask the question because it's part of their template, right? It's like it's the company guidelines of how they need to interact with customers, and in many cases they're just not used to that response because most people don't think about the consequences of giving away all this information, and so they just will answer anything that's asked of them. And so yeah, you have to be willing to say that you don't give away private information like that. And that's when it can get kind of weird, because then depending on like what their logical branching tree of how to react to that is, then you might end up having to like escalate to somebody else. I've certainly had some uh, odd roundabout interactions over the years where I was basically like the one guy who was asking to do something a way that wasn't part of corporate procedure, and so would have to keep pushing. Yeah, this is where sometimes you have to be insistent. You have to put your foot down, draw a line, and basically say, look, well, hopefully it's not a monopoly service. Hopefully you can say, look, I'll just have to go call your competitor and see how they react.
Yeah, I was able to get around it and they were okay with taking a deposit and stuff. So I was able to get around it. But definitely when I said I wasn't giving my social, the guy just kind of stopped in his track, and no one had ever really, or at least recently, not opted to give their social security number, which I just thought was a big breach of privacy. And
Yeah, I mean, so I think I tweeted about this, but I had an issue recently, which I've had before, but where, like I said, I don't own property in my real name, and that is an edge case that throws a number of companies for a loop, especially insurance companies, because I start to explain that the property is owned by a business, and then they start asking me for all the information about the business and like revenue and stuff. I'm like, no, it's an asset holding business, and most of the time they're like, oh, we don't know how to deal with that. And other times though, like I know when I bought a car one time, I started going down the similar path of they're like, this is really weird, we don't really know how to do this. And then like the guy calls his manager over, and the manager's like, oh, I've seen this once before. It's like, I know what you're doing, like we can help you out here. But it is, you do sometimes feel like a trailblazer, which is really odd, because like this should not be something that is like blazing a trail just to protect your privacy.
And I think it's even a weird thing that you're almost putting a target on your back, but in the sense for security and privacy, it's almost like they remember you because it's not a normal occurrence. So they're like,
Yes,
ah,
you're
yeah, this,
standing out. Yeah,
yeah.
that's not great. Like you normally want to blend in with the crowd, but in my experience, it can be odd like during that initial setup, but I think most of these people just quickly forget about you and move on.
You would hope so, that they don't remember what they had for lunch or breakfast, so they're not going to remember the transaction they had with you. But it definitely always kind of, not irks me, but I guess worries me that it's like, oh, they made a note of like, this is a unique customer, and for whatever that's worth, whether they think we're selling drugs or we own a lot of money, or for whatever nefarious reason that they would want to go after us or learn more, that's just something that always kind of like creeps over me, or worries me a little bit.
Yeah. And so, if you read through a bunch of my privacy stuff, then you'll find that really what most of this stuff comes down to is, if it's not simply withholding information, then it's using a proxy to protect your information. And a proxy can be many different things. People generally think of it in terms of internet terms and like VPNs and stuff, and that's one kind. But in meat space, as it were, you can have other humans be proxies for you, whether that is like for the physical mail delivery. You can get a PO box, you can get private remailers that handle your mail and then forward it wherever you want. Um, the sort of extreme end of this, which I have had to use a few times, is legal proxies, where I know there was one time a utility company was really insistent that they have like all my information. And eventually, because it was the monopoly, the only utility company, like, you want electricity, what I did is I called my attorney. I said, look, you need to go use your magical legalese to explain to this company like how this stuff is going to work. And unfortunately that can get expensive as well, but there's usually an option available.
Yeah, with unlimited time and unlimited resources, you can pretty much get anything done. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I hope that it went in your favor, at least that the monopoly didn't take out harsh punishment against you.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think one of the bad conclusions from this journey is that privacy is not cheap. Now, there are a lot of things that you can do to protect your privacy that don't cost money, but they will always cost you at least some sort of time and learning curve that you have to get up to speed to understand. Um, and this is the downside to all of the defaults in various aspects of our lives being very poor for our privacy, is that you have to work against the grain. You have to blaze that trail, and blazing a trail is inherently hard, because there's a lot of obstacles in your path. And so that's why it's unfortunate that, I think this is one of the reasons I'm a bit more pessimistic on privacy in general, is because, first of all, we know that most people don't think about it or care about it, at least until it's too late and something has gone wrong. And then if you do care about it and start trying to improve your own privacy, you find out very quickly that it's not necessarily easy, especially if you want to be comprehensive about it. So, and unless you're someone who's highly motivated or has had some sort of edge case attack like I have, it seems like it's going to be relegated more to the enthusiasts and adversarially minded folks.
Yeah, it doesn't help when the financial incentives are multi-billion-dollar businesses that are in the business of selling people's information. So there's a financial incentive in order to do so. I guess going back to like retaliation and stuff like that. So to your article, obviously they're a minor, and I don't want you to give out any information you don't feel comfortable about. But when you went to give your testimony and statement, I'm assuming maybe you talked to them, or maybe your lawyer advised you not talk to it. Do you think this person would maliciously do something to get back to you? Because obviously, even though the punishment might be small, do you worry that in once he gets off his probation or whatever, would come after you in a later function, or at least attempt to? I know you've put up roadblocks and ways to try and prevent that.
No, I don't think so. I really do think that it was just a guy who, first of all, he didn't know who I was. Or at least I believe when he told me that he didn't know who I was. That he was basically hanging out with the wrong crowd and got kind of goaded into using his skills for this particular thing. Yeah, I'm not too worried about him. I'm just worried about anyone else, any number of other more malicious people who might be willing to actually use physical violence. The guys who were sitting in a basement and hanging out in uh, darknet forums and swapping hacks and all this other stuff. It's an interesting subculture. But I think it's very easy if you're in that subculture to completely miss the ramifications, the consequences of what could happen to you. Whereas it's a very different type of criminal who is willing to say, come up to you and actually point a gun at you and, use physical violence. Because when you cross that physical threshold, like, they are actually putting themselves in physical danger, and it's completely obvious like what the level of risk that they're taking is. So that's really more of the criminal element that I'm worried about these days, rather than the keyboard warriors.
Yeah, and it goes to your point. It's almost like you were bummed that this minor was the one that got you, and kind of it seems like he didn't know you. I guess you were kind of hoping to get the people that gave the command, or the people or person that issued the order to go after you, because it kind of seems it was kind of a step away, probably trying to increase their own privacy in the attack that you kind of ensued against them. I guess physical attacks in the meat space, what would you give to a pleb that's going to a conference? Because in case the listeners don't know, Bitcoin Magazine is hosting one of the biggest and best Bitcoin conferences coming up April 6th through the 9th in Miami Beach, Florida. I hope Jameson will be there. I know his company will be there. So excited to see some of his employees as well as him if he's going. But how would you recommend a pleb have security and privacy at a conference like this?
Well, I mean, the first thing you have to understand is that criminals in the area are going to know that this is happening. And in fact, I believe there was at least one case last year of a guy who got in a taxi, and the taxi driver basically asked for his phone and was starting to screw around with it, and gave the impression that he was like trying to open up his wallets and steal his money. So you just have to be vigilant and understand that uh, you know this conference, because of its size and publicity, it's going to attract attention. And so if you're going to the conference, um, maybe when you're not physically at the venue, don't wear crypto stuff that makes you stand out. Definitely don't be walking around with large sums of money that are easily accessible. Like, you should not have a hot wallet on your phone that has thousands or tens of thousands. I mean, I've seen people who had like hundreds of thousands of dollars in a single signature wallet on their phone because they just left it there for so many years and never bothered to move it off. But um, consider the fact that you yourself can be a single point of failure. I talk about wrench attacks and physical attacks a decent amount, though they are very rare. Most likely the 99.9% of people who attend the conference will not have anything bad happen to them. However, just due to how many people are there and the fact that crime has certain rates of things that happen, probably will have one or two people who have a bad experience. And a lot of this stuff, this security, privacy, whatever, I think of it in terms of insurance, in that you know that bad things happen in the world, and a lot of them are fairly rare. And so the question comes down to, how much of your time and resources are you going to invest to insure yourself against one of these edge cases? And just doing something as simple as like not walking around with Bitcoin logos all over you when you go out to the nightclub where you might get something slipped in your drink. I think that's a pretty simple ask. Like, it doesn't take a lot of resources to do. But yeah, don't be stupid. I mean, you just need to make sure that you aren't attracting attention, and understand that if for some reason you do attract attention, that you need to be able to mitigate what the possible downsides are.
Yeah, I know some people don't have street smarts, and I'm not the most intimidating dude standing at a stature of like 5'6". So I'm not the scariest or biggest dude on the street, but definitely to your point, kind of be street smart. Don't, if you can avoid wearing Bitcoin merchandise or even talking about it. You know, say that you're in the financial sector. If you're out at the bar, don't say you work for a Bitcoin company. You know, I'll definitely say I work at a media company, and, you know, I'll probably get harassed for saying, you know, I'm the spreading bad news, and I'll go with that, saying I'm mainstream media, but they don't have to know it's for a Bitcoin company. Yeah, and I think that's pretty important. So, Jameson, I think we're getting to the end of the time that I had you. I don't want to keep you because I know you're quite busy with your day job and running a company. So, is there anything else that you'd like to send off our listeners with?
You know, just not to let it get to your head, right? Is that, you know, I talk about bad things happening all the time, but I've also been on the front lines of helping people self-custody their funds for many, many years. And so I've seen really some of the worst case scenarios. They're still very rare, but I think that they're useful data points, and they're learning lessons. And a lot of the decisions that went into how we've architected Casa and how we continue to develop the product are based upon very hard earned decisions that people have really learned the hard way over the years, sometimes through catastrophic loss or just having a really, really bad time as a result of one particular decision that was made. So there's, like I said, an overwhelming level of things that you can learn or dive into. But also, you know, you there's no rush. You have plenty of time. You can start small, spend a few hours on the weekend just digging into some of the easier stuff, and just doing that, just investing a few hours into your security and privacy will already put you ahead of 98% of other people in the world. And that's one of the other major factors when it comes to security, in a variety of different ways, is you don't have to have perfect security. You just have to have better security than the guy next to you. You know, it's kind of like the old adage about, you don't have to be able to outrun the bear. You just have to be able to run faster than the other guy. Is because we know there will be criminals, there will be malicious people out there trying to attack people, and if you think from their perspective, they're looking for the soft targets. They want to get the best return on their investment. And so if they look at you, well, preferably you'd make it so they don't even look at you in the first place. But if that fails and they look at you and they're also looking at any number of other targets, then you want them to say, nah, that looks like it's going to be too much trouble. I'm going to try to attack that other person instead.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a really good point. And thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and I look forward to seeing you in Miami, as well as a bunch of your employees that work there. So, everyone, we're going to get ready to go to a commercial break, and then I'll be back right after that, and we'll be prepping for the deep dive that's going to go on in Spaces. Catch you in a few. What is up, everyone? How is it going? So we've got a little bit of time before we go into the deep dive. Thanks for hanging out with us. If you have any questions, definitely throw them in the chat for YouTube or Twitch, and I'll make sure to answer them. In the meantime, I'll be putting up some earned carrot codes, and we could talk through some of the things about the conference. If you guys have not gotten your tickets already, you definitely have to go to b.tc/conference and use the code YTMAG for 10% off your tickets. Tickets will be going up in price on Friday at midnight, so make sure to get them if you haven't before then. Also, there is hotels are being booked up pretty quickly, and I know plane tickets are going up in price as well. As the event gets closer, there will be a couple other events unrelated to Bitcoin Magazine and the Bitcoin Conference going on in Miami that'll probably have a larger inflow of people into the city of Miami and Miami Beach. So make sure to definitely get your tickets today. So I'm gonna start putting up some earn carrot codes, and I know CK, Sam Rule, and the Rational Root will be joining us momentarily to talk through the deep dive and some of the charts that they will be going through on the deep dive. So while I'm setting that up, putting up the earn carrot code right now. Give me 1 sec. So make sure the Earn Carrot app is up on screen right now. If you guys don't have that, that is Bitcoin Magazine's app, and that you can use to earn sats. You can read articles in order to get sats, and we also give them out during the show. So that is the QR code to download the app, and I'm putting up the code right now. Okay, let me refresh. There we go. And now I'm going to go to the chat. In the meantime, anything. I advise folks to buy Bitcoin with new, fresh fiat, not shoveling the same old money. Just keep the buzz of the Bitcoin system. Yeah, I like that. If you can get some fiat, whether it's cash for doing hard labor, and then kind of use that in order to buy Bitcoin. Also, I know when people go to meetups, a lot of times people are willing to buy Bitcoin with cash. It's more of a privacy transaction. You're using Bitcoin normally peer-to-peer, where they use it with a Lightning Network transaction or across on chain. You're doing a peer-to-peer transaction, and it's very hard for someone to track. They're sending from your address to hopefully a newly given address for it. And then also you're just giving them cash, which is more discreet and private. Anything else from the Twitch? Just add the ETH button. Come back, Jack. Yeah, no. Oh, Twitter just added the ETH button. Oh, ew. That is disgusting. I know they added NFTs. I thought they added ETH a while ago, which obviously I'm not about. But it's the Jack leaves and they start doing all these altcoin things, which I'm not about. I know, so also expanding, I know that they also, wow, where am I going with this? The Canadian convoy, and I know obviously Trudeau was kind of labeling everyone as domestic terrorists, or at least calling them terrorists, and they're going after the financial means in order to go after these people in the Freedom Convoy or anyone that supported it. I know that obviously they shut down Give, Send, Go, as well as GoFundMe, pulled the donations, and then they were just doing a full return. Obviously, Tallycoin, which is the platform for raising Bitcoin for donations. I'm not going to oust the founders because I know that they are busy with stuff, but CK is joining us in a sec, but obviously they're trying to go after the founders of Tallycoin. They told Twitter a few days ago that they moved the funds not to them, to a private entity to distribute the funds to the truckers. And I think that was a great move in hindsight, or even before it was announced, the Emergencies Act in Canada, in order to protect them and themselves and their families from having repercussions. Whether that there's repercussions in court later on remains to be seen. Some people were saying on Twitter, and I wasn't able to verify this, that their names were listed and that the Canadian government, or I guess the financial institution there, was going to try and name them in the case against them for helping the Canadian truckers, but that remains to be seen. How's it going, CK? I know you just joined.
What is up? How you doing, Chris?
Good.
Excited for this show.
Yeah, a man in the ship here. So I was just kind of talking about the conference. CK, I know you can talk about it for days and days. So anything you want to expand on?
We just announced Jordan Peterson, y'all, like legend. He's getting into the Bitcoin space, and rightfully so. And he's going to be at the event. So extremely excited for that.
Yeah, I think that was tough keeping close to the chest. I think you and I and a lot of people that working for the team knew, but we weren't allowed to announce it until it was officially made public. So sorry guys for not lying to you, but withholding information about the conference. I hope we have more big name speakers like him and other ones joining in recent weeks. We're only 49 days away from the conference. Can you believe that, CK?
Dude, it brings a lot of anxiety to me, but it's coming. It's coming full steam ahead. There's nothing stopping the conference. The days just keep ticking away, and I am excited for it to happen. I don't like to say I want it to be over. I'm excited for it to happen. And that feeling that you get in your chest when the conference is successful is the best feeling ever. So I'm excited to put on the best Bitcoin conference for all the Bitcoiners out there.
I know CK and are going to be quite busy at the conference when it's going on. I'm just hoping I can enjoy it, and I hope it doesn't end in a blink of an eye, even though I know that's going to be the case. Anything in particular that you're looking forward to? I know last night I was saying there's a couple things I'm excited for, or why I'm bullish as of late.
Oh man, so much. I mean, we're throwing a motherfucking music festival. Like that's part of the conference. So that is unreal in and of itself. But yeah, I'm just so excited to just meet Bitcoiners. Last time, just left and right, people are just pointing me out and like, hey, what's up, CK? And just such an awesome feeling. I'm going to be giving away copies of the Sovereign Individual like I did last time around at the conference. So I think I brought like 8 copies. I just like smashed them into my suitcase and made it happen. And I gave away all 8 copies. So I'll probably do that again as well. So, there's nothing better than meeting Bitcoiners, hanging out with Bitcoiners, getting to hug and shake hands and, just chat with all the people that you've been rubbing shoulders with virtually on Twitter and stuff like that.
Yeah. I feel horrible saying this, but are the authors of the Sovereign Individual still alive? I know it was 2 authors.
One of them is still alive. Yeah.
Okay.
Lord Rees-Mogg is still alive.
We should try and get him to the conference.
Yeah, no, I think we've definitely been reaching out to him to do content, and he's not taking very many interviews these days.
Okay. That's a bummer. But I mean, he obviously wrote a great book, or at least a book that is beloved by Bitcoiners alike. I will say it's a tough read. I know you like it. It is it's a tough read for sure.
It's not easy.
But like most things like Bitcoin, it's not easy. It's getting easier, but it's it takes a lot of responsibility and self-sovereignty to do things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If you don't mind giving me a sec, I am gonna go. So we are simul streaming this what the fuck is up with the Bitcoin price with Root and Sam from the Deep Dive team on Twitter Spaces as well as on this YouTube live stream. So I need to get that set up really quickly and get that launched. But yeah, if you don't excuse me, Chris, I'm gonna jump to do that. Maybe be a good time to tell people a few more details about some speakers. I know we've been releasing panels as well. I don't know if you have any of that information handy.
Yeah, I can definitely look that up. And while CK is getting the spaces all set up, I'll pull it up. I don't want to reveal anything that isn't revealed yet. So I'll just go to the conference website where you can also get your tickets, and ticket prices are going up in 2.5 days. So Friday at midnight, the prices go up. So the only thing that is more scarce than Bitcoin is Bitcoin conference tickets, April 6th through the 9th in Miami Beach, Florida. It is going to be an absolute blast. Speaking of scarcity, I know CK brought this up yesterday on Spaces for the FAQ Spaces. Hotel rooms are becoming more and more scarce. So to make sure to get those, as well as to get your plane tickets, there will be a couple other events that are going on. For the there's a couple other events unrelated to Bitcoin Magazine and the conference that'll be going on at the same time. So obviously those events will be looking to try and get hotels and planes down there. Yeah, so we have different levels of passes. So the first level of pass is the GA pass. So that is general admission. That will get you into the conference April 7th and 8th. That is obviously the general conference that's going on. You'll see a lot of the big name hitters, whether it's President Bukele of El Salvador, Michael Saylor, Elizabeth Stark of Lightning Labs, Jack Mallers, Dr. Joe Jorgensen, JB Sears. We just announced Jordan Peterson, so it's excited to have him to the cast. The next tier up will be the industry pass. So that gives you access to the whole conference. So the industry day on the first day, April 6th, the general admissions 7 and 8, the Sound Money Music Festival, the first and only Sound Money Music Festival. We're going to try and make this a thing going forward, or a tradition, but it's a fully sound music thing. And there was a great question from the FAQ asking about if there will be other altcoins or cryptocurrencies. We are a Bitcoin only and Bitcoin only company and conference. So it's a single strike rule, meaning that if they bring up anything regarding any of their cryptocurrencies, it's one and done, and they will not ask to partake in it going forward. That sounds a little harsh, but we want it about Bitcoin and Bitcoin only. So, maybe there'll be some cool things with doing Bitcoin at the show, whether it's using lightning tipping, or even I know that there are ways to do NFTs on Bitcoin. I'm not an NFT guy, but if it's on Bitcoin, I'm all for it. So yeah, we've got so many great people coming up, and I know CK will be announcing more great people as well. So I hope you guys are all enjoying this stream. CK is getting up the live stream or the spaces on Twitter right now. But you guys are in the best spot ever. And why is that? Because this is YouTube or Twitch. I know my Twitch people. I love the Twitch people, but we have a promo code called YTMAG for 10% off your tickets. And they're at a discount because Friday they go up in price. So make sure to get them. Oh, yeah, and I forgot to mention the last 2 tickets as well. We have a whale pass that's all encompassing, all food, drinks, alcohol, transportation to and from the conference and the hotel, the best seating in the house. You can see when President Bukele makes his secret announcement that he said on Twitter a few weeks ago, as well as Jack Mallers saying he's orange pilled the world and saying 1 million more nations have joined, as well as the fireside chat.
We're getting started in about 5 minutes
Kathy
here.
Wood,
We are still waiting on a couple
as
more folks, but we have a simul stream.
As having Kathy Wood and Michael Saylor talking, which I think I'm really excited for. So I'm really, really looking forward to that as well. So the whale passes get you everything, the best seats in the house, as well as all of that. And then we have the Sound Money Music Festival for people that are in Miami or would just like to come for the show. I think it's going to be a sight to be seen. It's going to be really, really interesting. So, yeah, is there any other questions from chat? No. Okay, we're getting this started. CK, if you want to unmute and I will join the Twitter spaces. I know we've got the Rational Root in the house right now. How's it going?
What's up, Root? Yeah, I just got the space going, and Root is already in there, but we're still waiting on Mr. Sam. He has actually 1 more minute before the start of the programming. But Root, I guess if you want, why don't you introduce yourself to both the Twitter audience and the Spaces audience? I'll unmute real quick and I'll say that again. All right, so while we wait for Sam, we are going to introduce Root to the audience. Root, why don't you unmute yourself and introduce yourself?
Hey guys, thanks for having me on. I'm Root, on-chain analyst. I like to look at, Bitcoin cycle analysis and on-chain analysis is what I do. I like to get to the root of things. And yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. I love that, getting to the root of things. And some of my favorite parts of your analysis is how creative you are with trying to look at the data that is around Bitcoin. Can you talk about a couple of like the unique, visualizations and metrics that you use in your analysis?
Yeah, sure. So I have looked at, I started off with just looking at cycles. So comparing the different Bitcoin cycles. People have aligned them before from the halving, obviously. So I came up with some different concepts to look at it, to also look at it from the previous all-time high. And now you see the charts all over the place, but that was in the beginning. I made some spiral charts. I didn't come up with the spiral concept, but I surely worked upon it further, also to look at it at the spiral chart, for example, in terms of blocks instead of just time. And so those are some of the creative things I like to do. And soon I hope to come with even some more cool stuff. I cannot really talk about that yet, but there is a model that's coming up. Hopefully next week or so I can share it. So I'm excited for that as well.
All right, y'all. Well, we have Sam Rule in the house. We have Root in the house. This week, we will not have Dylan LeClaire. He is busy filming, actually, with Bitcoin Magazine up in Vermont. So more coming from Dylan later. But thankfully, Root is coming in to fill in Dylan's huge footsteps. And he is definitely well-suited to bring some really awesome analysis. Sam has set a pretty awesome agenda for us. But I want to give a quick shill to everyone about the deep dive. Sam, I know you and Dylan work really hard every single day, putting out some of the most cutting edge alpha around what is happening with the Bitcoin market. You look at derivatives, you look at market sentiment, you're looking at macro forces, you're looking at on-chain data. This is really a 360 analysis type of a deep dive. Sam, do you want to talk a little bit about or add on to what you're doing each day for the deep dive?
Yeah, totally, sure. Just like you said, Dylan and I are working at this every day, try to publish kind of a daily weekday issue on what's going on in the Bitcoin market. That can be everything from futures ETF to public miners analysis to price action to on-chain data, just trying to take a 360 view, like you said. We publish, weekday content for paid subscribers, about one issue a week for a free subscriber tier. So if you're just interested in checking it out, or you want to get some more Bitcoin market intelligence in your inbox, sign up for the free tier. It's on Substack. You can see the link in my Twitter or Dylan's. But yeah, I mean, this is what we're doing all the time, and just trying to deliver, good quality content and research about how the Bitcoin market structure works. So.
Yep. And actually, last month, they dropped a 30-page monthly report, which is pinned to the top. And if you follow the link in the pinned tweet, that will take you to the free tier, and you'll be able to get that PDF monthly, which is absolutely just incredible. So really great job, Sam and Dylan, on that. Sam, I guess let's just jump into the topics. I know the first one that you had teed up here is talking about the latest price action and overall market thoughts. I personally, I'm unsure of where we are. It seems like Bitcoin's more relevant than ever, but obviously price action doesn't always follow that. I've spoken to really, really smart people that think we're in a bear market and that we're going to be grinding down. I'm curious what you and Root are thinking. I'll pass it off to you, Sam, and then maybe Root can chime in.
Yeah, I'll share. And this is tough. You're thinking about all the time about this much broader market and where it's headed, and a lot of uncertainty. And I think, the way I've been leaning into analysis is try to understand the macro uncertainty picture as much as possible, which, we kind of saw from Bitcoin price in Q4 after this run up to new all-time highs, whether it's this kind of end of the year gain loss selling, kind of risk off appetite, increasing portfolio rebalancing allocations. Bitcoin just like the rest of the markets, equity markets included, went down. And so, now the regime that we're headed into from a macro regime for this year is not a promising one for Bitcoin outlook. So you have these like two colliding forces where you have really strong fundamentals, but you have a macro outlook now that's, we'll see if inflation peaks anytime soon, but growth declining. That puts this tough backdrop on Bitcoin. And I think the cycle this time around, we can get into cycles talking. I know Root's done a lot of work on that previously. It hasn't really followed suit to the cycles we had before. It's much different. Bitcoin's a much more growing asset. Volatility seems to be dampening compared to the kind of blow off tops we had before. So I like to see, here we look in a ranging consolidation phase. Equities correlations is still heavily strong. It's good to see that, lately, and we got some charts we can pull up too after we go through some intros, but, Bitcoin really getting hit, going down 30, 40% 2 times on a 30-day percent change. And then you see some good demand buying that in too. So I think you might have had, some macro sellers in Q4 reallocate, sell off some Bitcoin. And what's left is some really strong fundamentals. But I think uncertainty is the key word. Like over the next 2 months, or what, we seem to be in a waiting holding period for what the macro is going to do with March rate hikes coming up.
Okay, I can maybe jump in here. So I'm unmuted, right? Yeah. So I think I kind of agree with Sam's analysis. I think the situation we are currently in is most comparable to the 2019 run we had, and then we had it we went to 14K and then we had a drop. In terms of on-chain analysis, I think we're in a very comparable situation with that one. And so I think there's a lot of macro uncertainty. There was actually also in that time, because we got the Corona crash just then, and that brought us back to a low. So I have some on-chain floor indicators that I look at. One is an intermediate indicator, and that's around 36K. And then there is really a floor, which is at 29 currently. And it depends a bit. So I expect to get to this intermediate floor, let's say, it's called the mezzanine actually. It's quite likely that we might touch upon it. We don't have to in the next days or even in the next week or 2 weeks or something, but it's quite likely that at some point we will still touch upon that level again. That level is also, it rises, it goes a bit along with price action. So, but even so, only I would say in terms of if we get a black swan event, let's say the war with Russia, with Ukraine, if stuff like macro uncertainty, increases, if we get a sort of panic in the stock market, in equities as well, then surely that will correlate with Bitcoin. And I think we can drop to the floor, which is at 29 currently. Now, I do think actually the low is in terms of on chain. If we look, there's many indicators, we'll get into several as well in a bit. But there's many on-chain indicators that indicate that we have been at a macro low. Short-term holder supply is one of them. And so I actually do think the macro low is in. We're just in kind of this choppy price action situation. I think we're going to range a bit between 47K, which is the short-term holder cost basis, which is a level that sure might give some resistance in the next weeks or so. And so I think we're kind of going to range between 47K and maybe 36, for some weeks, maybe even until March. But in the meantime, we're kind of building up this solid basis, because the demand of short-term holders is slowly coming back. And it takes time. We are a little bit in bear market conditions for sure, if you look at on-chain, and but it looks like this bottom is in and that we're slowly getting out of it. So it will take some time. We will probably have some swings up and down still, as I said, within that range. And that's for me basically the base case. And I would expect at some point, maybe even a little bit before, or mid-March or so, or if not at the end of March, I would expect that Bitcoin can, if we can recover this short-term holder cost basis, then we can get really higher prices from there on. But we're kind of at the start of a new cycle, in my opinion. I mean, you can look at it from different perspectives. You can look at it as a lengthening cycle. If we all believe the top is not in yet, if we believe that 100K at least is coming or so before next halving, you can look at it two ways. You can look at it as a lengthening cycle, that we're now currently again in this in a sort of mini bear market again, But I would argue, and I've put a chart on that out, and we'll probably discuss that a bit later as well, is that we're kind of in a new cycle. Basically, if you look at the supply dynamics on chain, it looks like we're kind of starting a new cycle overall, but it's kind of the same outcome, right? Like I would expect still to reach at least levels of 100K before next halving, but yeah, we will see. We will go with the data, and yeah, maybe we can get into some charts.
Yeah, speaking of charts, would love to get into some charts. And for everyone who's watching or listening on Spaces, I pinned to the top the link to go to the live stream where we are live streaming. You can go and see Root's cute little mascot here, and you can also go check out the charts we're going to walk through. But honestly, it's way better to see Root here on YouTube versus on Twitter Spaces. So really recommend porting over to that. But Sam, I don't know if you have some charts handy that you want to jump into right away here. I guess you have something ready, but in general, I do kind of agree with you, Root, that we are at this kind of we're at a critical point here where are we going to find out if this is in fact a longer cycle and the top is yet to come, or if we have entered into the next cycle and the previous top was 69K or something like that. Sam, I see you're showing a chart here. You want to take over?
Yeah, we've just got some charts here we can run through, and we can take the kind of conversation wherever. I'm no technical analyst by any means. When I look at price, I do some, but kind of hold a lot more analysts in high regard of what they can do there. But quickly, what this is looking at in terms of when we just think of like price and context and some of these moves, this is 30-day change in Bitcoin price. And I've got a legend here. It says bottom, other, top. Those aren't necessarily, perfect conditions of saying, hey, this is a top, this is a bottom or other. It's really just looking at this 30-day percent change in price, kind of the average around there, 9 to 12% through the mean. And then looking at like having an overextension of that to the top when you have these explosive Bitcoin moves up, and then something to the bottom as well. So I think what's really curious in this sense is, although, this might, emphasize maybe the macro uncertainty point, kind of what we've seen a little bit more in Q4 is that, we have multiple 30-day price changes below, minus 15% over the last few months. And the latest being 31%, it starts to look like a pretty attractive period if you're an investor on the sidelines and looking at Bitcoin and saying, what's a good entry price when everything, is particularly oversold. But kind of that drawdown, the previous ones were, July 2021, which we had massive liquidation cascades, price moves 43% almost in over 30 days. And then pre that, the COVID crash, we had 52%. So pretty significant over the last, 3 or 4 years. So to see that as like a top 4 drawdown in terms of price, which I think at the same time, when you look at the demand side, we've seen some fund inflows pick up. Different ways that you can, measure whale buying. You see some accumulation and demand there, apart from other news stories we get of other people picking up Bitcoin. So that latest drawdown seems like a pretty attractive price where people got at 34, 35,000. Seems to be a little bit more demand there. Didn't reach kind of 30,000 lows that we saw before. So just kind of an interesting point there. And then I'll just touch on, kind of, let's see if I get to the next slide here. Just looking at like mega 1-day percent changes. So yeah, in price, when you look at just day over day change. So for a long time period through Q4, didn't see in terms of like major volatility moves. And then you get this huge drawdown period to the bottom side that's quickly kind of accumulation is built up or demand is built up there. So just some interesting observations for, kind of price change demand over the last 3 months.
Root, you want to jump into either of these slides that Sam just went over?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I think the price changes, they're very interesting charts. especially the 30-day price change. I think, yeah, they align kind of with what I already said earlier, that kind of this macro bottom seems to be in. You can see that this last, the dark blue zone, let's say at the last drop, which kind of indicates that this bottom is in, also from price change perspective. I think yeah, there's several several on-chain indicators that there's confluence with those indicators in terms of this. And so yeah, I think we see it kind of at many, if we look at things from this like more TA perspective, or even from the fundamental perspective, we get to like similar conclusions that it quite looks like this bottom is in. And another way to look at this is that again, to say like, why wouldn't we drop like further or so? We also have to keep in mind that we had like a distribution top and not a blow off top this time. And so the downside also seems to be less, and there's a lot of the derivative market has a big influence as well on the market. During the bull market, we saw that there was a lot of leverage, going into, instead of spot, derivatives were being used. And we see that now also in the bear market, in these a bit of more bearish conditions, that derivatives are playing a role. So there's less, there's de-risking, which happens in the derivative markets instead of in the spot. And so this is also another reason why I think that the low is likely in, and that we don't have to expect a deep drop like for example as in the Corona crash, which you can see like the minus 52%, and now we have had like the minus 31% almost. So I think yeah, unless we get a black swan, as I said, we can reach those kind of similarities still with the Corona event. Otherwise, I think yeah, it's more likely. Doesn't mean that it cannot happen. Everything, we look at probabilities all the time, but my base case would be definitely that the low is in, which also seems to reflect in this chart.
Yeah, totally. And I don't have the chart here, but we've shown the derivatives kind of funding chart very color coded before in terms of what we saw in like the April, kind of June, July area, where you have kind of overlong leverage liquidations, and then you have an over period of, short liquidations. Oh, the market is overlong and it's over short, and it's inflating price and it's deflating price. And now what we've seen kind of like over the last, 1 to 2 months, we've seen this like slow winding down, a little bit of leverage leaving the system, and overall everything is more market neutral. So I would say when you think about, okay, is the macro, the on-chain, the derivatives driving, I would, in my head, I would say, okay, really subject to macro conditions now, on-chain fundamentals kind of second behind that, and derivatives don't look too overextended like they had when we were at kind of previous April top. But we can get into some of the on-chain stuff. This kind of goes along with a little bit of price changes and kind of on-chain sentiment, and then we can get into some other kind of macro on-chain indicators, some interesting ones that we're looking at, talk about bottoms and tops, where we're at in the cycle. What I'm showing here is just spent output profit ratio. So if you're familiar with on-chain or you've seen it, you're probably familiar with this metric. It's really calculated as price sold over price paid. So just looking at when the market is in, kind of this state, is it taking profit? Is it taking loss? It's looking at the 7-day moving average here. And I've got two charts here, just breaking it down into two groups, short-term holders and long-term holders. And so, what's interesting about this one is typically, we, in these kind of bottom market events, we go through, people realizing more losses or realizing a lack of profit, either profit or loss below that. So here, you have the market realizing kind of in previous downturn in terms of June, upward of a couple percent during the COVID crash, upwards of like 4 or 5% realizing in the market. And so now we've kind of come from this bottom where people were selling Bitcoin, realizing it at a loss, kind of a total aggregate level. and we're back to this kind of like state of profit. SOPR is back over 1.0. Which has typically been a positive sign in the market. You know, we'll see if this sustains, and we can talk about it between the two different groups. But I don't know about you, Root. I see this as, you know, generally a positive sign right now that we've kind of out of this short-term holder, maybe capitulation, selling some losses, still below the on-chain cost basis, like you mentioned, of around 47,000 or so. But kind of easy landing or soft spot right here where we're at right now.
Yeah, so exactly. So the short-term holder SOPR is especially, you know, more on the to look at the shorter time frame as well. So it's like more an early sign, let's say. I've actually used this chart for my for this week's analysis of BTC Direct as well. I was looking at this as well, and yeah, so SOPR, you know, we tend to bounce off one during a bit of like bullish you know, periods, and we reject off of one during like the bearish periods. And it's kind of it's a good indicator to find like local bottoms and local tops, you know, like in the market. And so so the short-term holder SOPR, but as well as the just regular SOPR, it's now, so it looks at basically at an aggregate of all transactions of the day, and if they are in profit or in a loss, you know, like on average. And so if they're above one, they're in a profit, and that's why it tends to be, you know, it tends to bounce off one during bullish periods and reject off of one in bearish periods, as I said, because this is, you know, in a bearish period, when we get to one, so basically people that hold that transaction get break even, and so then they tend to sell, you know, and that's why we reject off of one, you know, and the opposite is true in bull market conditions. So in bull market conditions, one means kind of that the profit has reset to zero, and that's often a sign that we go back up. So the positive thing, I mean, here at this chart, we look relatively zoomed out, but if you zoom in a little bit more, we kind of had like a bounce off one, just a very small one. So it's a little early to say that we're back in a bit more a bullish period, but we had this small bounce off of one, which is generally a good sign. We have to see if it you know, if it doesn't reject, you know, in the next few days. But if we go up a little more, even in the next days or so, I would say, yeah, that's a very good sign again, that the bottom is in. So yeah, nice chart.
Yeah, and then kind of the other side of that too. I mean, short-term holders, kind of long-term holders. I think long-term holders are kind of a more interesting trend when you're looking at kind of spent output profit ratio in terms of a lot of distribution or kind of local tops when you see like an extended period of profit taking. So if you kind of look at the bottom chart here, kind of long-term holder SOPR, you're looking at, you know, kind of this peak in when we were in 2021 around April. You're seeing, you know, long-term holders on average in the market realizing upwards of, you know, 700% in the market on a 7-day moving average, which really kind of marks the peak of the cycle here as long-term holders are, you know, selling, they're distributing, they're taking profits, and then you kind of run out of kind of new buyer demand. So it kind of gets exhausted. And then we have kind of price to fall again. But what's interesting is, you know, we have a lot of profit taking during that period. Back to our most recent high, very small, very muted in terms of what we saw before. So, you know, I'd take this and have been for a while, long-term holders just generally looking and having holder conviction, and we can talk about it a little bit more, looking for higher prices where their kind of cost basis is now, or the price they paid. And then we just got a little annotation here, spike in it when Bitfinex had kind of hacked coins seized. So you see that little bit on-chain movement there, but mostly kind of muted in terms of overall, you know, profit taking, what we see from long-term holders right now.
I just want to jump in again and encourage everyone. This is brought to you by the Deep Dive. All the charts that we are discussing are viewable via YouTube. If you click on the first pinned tweet, you can go watch this on YouTube and see the charts that we're referring to. And all of the charts that we're discussing were created by Sam and Dylan LeClaire, and they put on the deep dive every single day to paid subscribers, and they also do a weekly email for free subscribers, and they put together all this incredible information on a weekly and monthly basis. So really incredible stuff. So go jump over to YouTube, check it out. Go check out the deep dive. You can sign up by going to Sam's profile and clicking on our welcome link in his pinned to his info. So go do that real quick. And yeah, I guess Sam, let's keep rolling with what's happening with the price and these charts.
Cool. Yeah. Why don't we jump into a couple on-chain cycle indicators and just talk through where they're at, where they've been in previous cycles, some ones that I'm kind of looking at right now. Root can share on his thoughts on ones he's looking at and paying attention to. Obviously, one of the biggest ones in terms of on-chain, Dylan and I are tracking some of our 2025 kind of key on-chain metrics, and we're trying to look at those, how they've historically performed in different cycles and where we're at today. So this one I'm showing is just market value over realized value. And then there's Z-score version of that, which is just value over mean, some statistical normalization to give a little bit better signal in the metric. But really what this says, you can look at market value, same price, around 44,000, or market cap around 860 billion, over realized value, which is kind of that on-chain cost basis net. So we talk about short-term holders having, an average on-chain cost base of 47,000. If you include long-term holders, that brings, your realized cost basis, your value down to 24,000. You can think about a market cap terms around, kind of 460 billion. So it's really just a ratio of those two. Probably one of the most popular on-chain metrics to look at. I think there's a lot of value in this one, but in this particular one, what we look from previous cycles, we have these blow off parabolic type moves in these tops, and then you have the extended downturns where kind of the market value or price even reaches below realized value, and those become pretty kind of generational buying opportunities when that happens historically. And what we get this time is we get price kind of overheated to the upside, but not near as much as what we saw in previous cycles. And then every time prices essentially try to cool off and reach back down to that cost basis. In the last two price downturns, see some demand stepping in to buy into that. And so, and I'll just emphasize, these colors, a little bit more of a subjective way, although grounded in some objectivity to kind of do this, help people give a good idea of different parts of cycles, how we look at it. So this is just based on, percentile analysis, where we look at the value today relative to historical percentile, and then we just put some thresholds around that based on history. So in this particular case, something that's overcooled, really dark green here in MVRVZ score, is below its 15th percentile, and then kind of overheated is above 98th percentile. So one that right now points to kind of more of a neutral market standing. Fits with that, in this consolidation ranging phase, looking to see what catalysts move where we go next.
Root, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So yeah, I really love this on-chain metric. Market value against realized value is a very useful tool, in my opinion. So yeah, you can clearly see in this chart that we never got to the overheated, the truly dark red, let's say. But so therefore again, I would stress that we also will not get to the overcooled, so it goes both ways. If we don't have the extreme upside, we don't have the extreme downside. And so I'm not saying we will not get a blow off top again in the future, but the market has been maturing a bit. I mean, the size of the market is bigger. Derivatives are now a part of the market, which maybe is just it's more reasonable to assume more of distribution tops and also less severe bottoms from now on. Like things could change. There are some theories, maybe on why we would maybe perhaps get blow off tops in the future. But for now, it seems we're in this phase where we kind of have just more of distribution tops and less severe bottoms. So again, only like a black swan event, I would expect us to get like to this overcooled, colors. But otherwise, I would think like just the green cool colors are good enough of a bottom. And again, if you compare it to the 2019 run up, which was from 3K to 14K, let's say, it also was not as much of a blow off top. And it was also kind of a little bit more distribution top. And there we actually also just got back to a similar level that we are now, at just a cooled level. Only the Corona drop took us to like overcool levels. But if Corona wouldn't have happened, I think we would have stayed in just the lighter green colors there as well. So this chart again shows this basically. Yeah, there's a lot of confluence along many of the on-chain indicators, which kind of show this narrative.
Yeah, no, and I love the point too that if you don't have this blow-off type top, you don't have that volatility, the upside, then you're certainly less likely to get that downside potential as well. We can go into another one here. Just got a few here to kind of talk through, and kind of same pattern, percentile analysis around these on-chain indicators. This one in particular is coin days destroyed, and it's the 90-day cumulative view of that. So just a refresher, people who don't know, coin day destroyed would be, let's say, one Bitcoin has sat in an address for 100 days. And then when that is transacted or moved from that address, or we see movement in that coin, essentially you have 100 days, coin days destroyed then. So it takes into account when you have kind of these longer holder coins that have been around for a long time. Let's say it's a very small amount of Bitcoin, but it's been around for 1,000 days and hasn't moved. So when it moves, it has a higher amount of coin days. And so we look for that activity as saying, is there a lot of distribution in some of these older coins that are moving, or is there a lot more maybe non-movement or accumulation that's happening when you look at coin days destroyed? So if you were to look at this chart and say, just a coin day destroyed on a specific day, it doesn't give you a lot of insight. But if you aggregate it over 90 days, it gives you a good picture of kind of like where the short-term trend is. And so, a big thing that we see now in terms of our previous top that we hit, we saw a lot more older coin activity, and that's confluent with a lot more profit taking and long-term holder groups. We see a lot more activity on the ledger where you're seeing older coins come alive and sell, take profits, do that at the top. And that top I'm referring to is around like April 2021. And then you see us make a new all-time high top, but you see much less coin movement here. Like you see much more holding activity from long-term holders. You see a lot less distribution. Again, signaling, this is the case where the market is not overheated at these price levels based on the activity of kind of long-term holders, and points to again that right now the conviction is looking for more kind of higher prices before distributing a lot more of those coins. Would comment too, this is relying on like new demand coming in as well. So if we have a lackluster group of new demand, then you're probably not going to see pushing up higher prices or heavy distribution there either.
Yeah, this is also a great chart. I think what's very interesting is that we made a new all-time high, during this heavy accumulation, and it's basically the first stop we had was based on hype, and so there was a bit more distribution. It still remained kind of neutral, but the second top of 69K was just based on long-term holder conviction rather than short-term holder and hype. And you can clearly see that in this chart that there's accumulation going on while making a new all-time high, which is it's quite interesting. It shows that there is conviction from long-term holders, and I think that's a very bullish sign. Because that's once short-term holders start to come in this market, if hype starts to pick up again, and that's just a matter of time. It takes probably a catalyst, some type of catalyst to start going. Maybe the meetup in Miami can cause some momentum to start going, which is relatively soon, or some other bullish news. But we kind of see that short-term holders are slowly getting, they're picking up. We've just made a low, and we're kind of picking up. So short-term holders are slowly coming back into the market, and so it takes some time. But in the meantime, long-term holders have conviction, and that's why we made this second top, in just basically more bear market conditions without any hype, which is quite remarkable.
So bullish. I absolutely love that point. Root, you've made it before on Twitter Spaces here, and I'm really excited to just continue to see the long-term holder conviction grow and that be something that people rally around. I also am kind of bullish for the Bitcoin 22 pump. So, I mean, I don't want to jinx it too early, but a lot of people are coming together for Bitcoin 22. It's going to be a big deal, and it's really, really exciting. So check that out. Go to b.tc/conference. April 6th. It's 49 days away. It's April 6th through 9th. All your favorite Bitcoiners. Today we just announced Jordan Peterson, a lot of really big names. President Bukele has promised huge announcements. So really, really excited for this event. But yeah, I mean, really exciting to see that. And I want to make a shout out for everyone on YouTube. Smash that like button. Make sure to subscribe to Bitcoin Magazine. We're bringing you no BS Bitcoin content every single day in multi-channels. We're doing it on Spaces. We're doing it on YouTube. We're doing it everywhere. So bringing you the charts, bringing you the newsletters, bringing you the hard-hitting Bitcoin content. So, this is what Bitcoin Magazine's all about, and we're doing it on pretty much every platform. Back to you, Sam.
Cool. I've got one more here in just terms of on-chain indicators, kind of macro, cyclical, where we are, how we're viewing them. And then we can go to another topic. We can dive into any other kind of macro on-chain indicators we want to cover. This one is a little bit more complex, but it's got a lot of information tied into it. It's called reserve risk. Basically, what this is a cyclical market indicator, and it's trying to quantify the risk reward, or kind of the opportunity risk of allocating to Bitcoin based on conviction of long-term holders. So we talked about how you can see the conviction of long-term holders in you can look at their supply, you can look at their profit taking, you can look at coin days destroyed, which skews towards older coins. This is kind of a metric that encompasses a lot of that all together. And so I won't get into maybe the weeds of this calculations because it's really deep and not fun necessarily for Twitter Spaces, but we got an issue on it on the deep dive. It's number 94. We can put a link in for that. I know Glassnode has some great videos and talking through how reserve risk is calculated if you're interested in getting to the weeds. But really what this is saying is like when reserve risk is low, holder conviction is high and price is low. And so when reserve risk is high, holder conviction is more low and price is high. And so when you think about the best time that you want to allocate to Bitcoin on a risk reward standpoint based on its history, the best time to buy Bitcoin or allocate to Bitcoin is when you have confidence from long-term holder owners of the asset, and that's very high. But then the price is very low, and the worst time to buy is when their confidence is low. And so this is a good indicator when people talk about the smart money, long-term holders, what's happening. And we're getting to a period now, with price falling, holder conviction, is increasing some, and you're getting to kind of this opportunity state or kind of better reward state to allocate based on history. So it's been very few times where we see reserve risk really go through like a very low percentile or get this kind of max opportunity allocation. Like we talked about before, didn't really get kind of a blow off top, which comes with a blow off top in this metric. So may not be as much downside. So more confluence in just allocating and talking about long-term holder conviction.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this chart again shows what we kind of just summarized. Like again, like no dark red colors, and there's even like only slight bit of orange here, and so why would we get into this darker green? I cannot see it happen. But again, if I look at some of the bottom indicators that I like private ones that I use, floor indicator, which is currently at 29, which would be kind of max pain. I still think then we would maybe barely touch like this darker green zone, let's say. So but I think, yeah, to me it looks still again like the macro bottom is in, and anything can happen if we get a lot of uncertainty, but it also has to feel uncertain, right? Like in this conditions have to feel realistic. I mean, we see a bit of bear market conditions on chain. Obviously the sentiment has to align with that. So I understand that there's a lot of fear and uncertainty in the market, and but once Bitcoin starts going, above 50K or so, again, I'm sure like the bullishness will come back, and people will start saying again, like, oh yeah, it was inevitable, but now it has to feel realistic. It has to feel that there is all this uncertainty, and yeah, we can see some deleveraging and some less risk taking in the derivatives as well. Basically until March, it seems that people are not taking on as much risks in derivatives as well, and so it probably has to do with the rate hike that's coming up, and so yeah, it makes sense that until then there is some uncertainty, and we will get this choppy price action in this range. So that's kind of my opinion on all of this.
I want to jump in real quick. Someone that I respect an enormous amount, who is a macro thinker and really big picture person, hedge fund guy, says, I think we're going to go down to 20K. How do you all feel about that statement, given the macro circumstances around stock market, around macro uncertainty, geopolitical uncertainty, etc.?
I don't mind jumping in here. Yeah, I mean, from an on-chain perspective, I do not see it happen. As I said, like, so my floor is at 29K, and that would be kind of the lowest we go. But sure, I mean, if we get like a serious black swan, if we get like the S&P to drop 40% or something, yeah, sure, Bitcoin could maybe head lower. With it would still be a wick in my opinion, relatively. But yeah, I think based on historic data, it seems very, very unlikely. Realized price is a bit lower than my floor indicator. We could see a wick down to the realized price, or even a bit below. We have seen that in severe bear markets. In the 2018, we went below realized price for a bit as well. But again, I would say, since we didn't have the upside, I just don't see us go there to that extreme of a downside.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point to say, without the upside, where's the downside? I think ultimately what you're betting on there is, like Root said, black swan event, something in equities. Equities already down 10, 15%, already had that drawdown. So essentially, with Bitcoin being a higher beta asset to equities, kind of moves further on their moves. You're going to be looking for another 10, 15% type move down event. So I think that's what you're really banking on if you're looking at price going that far down. Even then, realized cost basis right now is at 24,000, and there's been a few events in Bitcoin's time where that's been tested, where price goes below that in the worst case scenario. And then that's quickly, a long-term great buying opportunity if you're looking at, 4 or 5 year time horizon. So I would put a low probability for my end, not out of question, but I think, there's some bearish room to go lower, but not that low.
All right, where do we want to take it next? Exchange balances.
Yeah, we can cover exchange real quick. I want to leave. I know Root has done a lot of interesting work on halving cycles, super cycle analysis, and we got a chart from him in here. So I'd love to spend more time on that. But we can run through just kind of the state of exchange balances so far. Let me get this back. 2 changing slides.
Quick reminder, if you are listening to this on Spaces, we have a lot of new people. We are sharing all of these charts over on YouTube. So the very first pinned tweet has the YouTube link and you can watch this live. But yeah, I think we are sharing the charts again. Go for it, Sam.
Yeah, charts are back up. I think exchange balances, it's a simple way to look at the market, but a good way for a lot of people who are not thinking on chain all the time to try to get a more macro picture of what's happening. As I think, exchange kind of balances and the flows can give you a proxy for some demand, especially for outflows and when that's happening. Would just caution with the exchange balance flows, shorter time frames when you're looking at a day or a few days. This stuff changes all the time, and it's very dependent upon address and entity clustering and classifications and really sophisticated data science techniques that we don't do in-house. We rely on a lot of class nodes in this case with this data. So just caution people when you're looking at that on a shorter time frame. But I love this chart from a monthly view. We talked about a lot in terms of this trend in exchange balances declining since 2020, which is really March 2020 COVID crash. You have years and years of inflows on monthly and annual levels, and then come 2020, we see this huge outflow of Bitcoin from exchanges each month, and we continue to see so far in 2022, kind of into January. We had some modest outflow into October, which we talk about, maybe some more macro selling in October, November, December, kind of in Q4. It was, much smaller in comparison to what we saw in May of 2021, right before that kind of huge liquidations cascade. But so far, starting to see a decent amount, relatively strong amount of exchange flowing out of, or Bitcoin flowing out of exchanges, which, a good signal of like that short-term demand. So I would look at that and look at fund inflows and look at kind of accumulation across different groups and say that's good confluence that there's good demand and buying here for Bitcoin. And so, hopefully we're going to continue this trend through the next couple months.
Yeah, I think it's a very good sign. Exchange outflows, that just means there's a bit more conviction. People are storing their coins in cold storage. I also think we will kind of just, since we are in this kind of accumulation phase, it's likely that we will continue to see exchange outflows. I think only when there's a bit of hype coming and some, if we get really some higher prices that people are tempted to sell again, that we will see some inflows into exchanges. So I still expect in the next months to just kind of have like this slight outflow of coins out of exchanges.
Yeah, and then there's just another way to look at it. Show another chart here, just looking at like the latest 30-day sum kind of cumulative flows of exchanges. And when that's, on the scale here, we've got an extreme of, 200,000 really dark blue flowing out of exchanges versus, 200,000 flowing in a state of over the last 30 days, about, 35,000 Bitcoin flowing out of exchanges, somewhat of a decelerating trend, kind of shifts right at that January 22nd, where Bitcoin seems to find that bottom around 35,000, start to see a lot more buying and exchange outflowing around the same time. So just an interesting thing to keep track on. And then, last chart we can do here on exchanges, and we can, maybe switch over and talk about halving cycles. This is just another way to look at that relationship between price. I find it useful for myself when I think about the 90-day flow of exchanges, net positive, or like inflow versus outflow. And so I've got the axis flipped here on the right-hand side, which is kind of that total 90-day cumulative flow. so that when, Bitcoin is flowing out, you're expecting to see this, correlation with price moving up. And then, reverse when Bitcoin is flowing into exchanges, kind of see that price off. And so that's a relationship we've seen pretty strong over the last year, apart from a few months. And so that's what we're seeing now, right? We're seeing what seems to be more demand flowing in, more Bitcoin flowing out of exchanges, price kind of moving in coordination with that. So, interesting way to look at like kind of the 90-day trends and see how that's going to continue. But so far, kind of a deacceleration in terms of more outflow is a good sign short term.
Yeah, definitely fully agree on this chart.
Cool. Why don't we switch topics here then, and then talk about some Bitcoin super cycle dynamics, maybe your thoughts, your thesis on this route. I know you just put this out today, so I'm curious to hear. I haven't got to hear kind of a more long thesis or understanding of it yet.
Yeah, so here we look at a bit of the supply dynamics, on chain, and that in terms of cycles. So you can see here it starts around the second halving. We have this supply from long-term holders that is in profit, which turns over, right? And this is normal during the beginning of like a new bull market when there's a lot of demand. This was the 2017 cycle. There's a lot of demand coming in the cycle. So profit from or supply from long-term holders goes to short-term holders, and so you get this turnover. And then, so obviously at the top, we have the short-term holder top in 2017, a lot of hype in the market, and that hype ends. So then, you can see also that kind of we mark a bottom with the profit, supply by long-term holders that is in profit. And then we kind of, we get into this bear market. And so basically you could see this first dotted line basically as a kind of a first support line as well there from if you look at supply from long-term holders. And then so if we get into further in the bear market, we break that support basically, and we go down even further during the bear. And this again, so we had a blow off top in 2017. We went to these extreme lows, in 2018, 19 even. And then we got this long-term holder run in 2019, which was actually just based on the conviction again of long-term holders, because there was like hardly any demand coming into Bitcoin, and there was no hype. Really, there was a bit of hype around the long-term holders, but there were not many short-term holders coming into the market. Like some in 2019, but it was still relatively low. And so we got this top based on long-term holder conviction there. We went to 14K, and then we started dropping again. It was not sustainable because there was no new demand coming in to keep on, keep this move going. And so we went down, and you can see then that we kind of made the bottom again with the profit, with the long-term holder supply and profit in that first orange circle, which you could mark basically as, well, the end of that cycle, or the start of basically a new cycle. So we find that support on that same dotted line, the first support area. And then we get soon after, we actually start recovering, but we soon after get the COVID, the black swan COVID event, and we drop even lower. So we get kind of this black swan. We go to the floor basically in this chart. And then we obviously Bitcoin is very underpriced. Many of the long-term holders started to buy when Bitcoin started to drop there, me included, and we went straight back up. And this was the third halving. Also, some of the hype maybe from the halving coming up. Fear quickly dissolved, and we got back into this bull market mode. And so we made a similar pattern there with new highs. We had again this kind of soon after the third halving, we made like a small top, a bit of a dip there, and then again we went into this new phase of hype, and the same thing happens over. Long-term holder supply of long-term holders that profit moves to short-term holders. We get this short-term holder top. exactly the same thing has happened during the second halving cycle, basically. And the last run, it was purely based on long-term holders. Short-term holders were out of the market, and we made this top just based on conviction of long-term holders. And yeah, since then we have come down a bit, but we found now again this support at this first area. Now there is no second floor here. That's again for me a reasoning that why I don't see also Bitcoin price going even lower, because we kind of found support at this level that seemed to be also a line if you look at this pattern in the previous cycle. And so I would argue that from here up, like we were starting a new hype cycle, basically. It will go slow at the beginning. Hype, it will take several months before new hype comes in. But to me, this is kind of the first sign on chain that we're kind of deviating from a traditional cycle, which used to be from halving to halving, because here we have seen this exact same pattern that we had in the whole last halving. It just played out, and we're not even halfway this halving, right? So to me, it seems that we're kind of deviating away from the halving hype cycle, and that perhaps like we could see this as a new cycle starting, which is basically the meaning of a super cycle, right? Deviating away from the traditional halving cycle, and so for me, these are the first signs of that. And together with like a more derivatives in the market and things going on, this kind of makes sense to me as well. At some point we had to deviate away from it, because also the influence of the halving is kind of has been decreasing traditionally. Every halving impact was kind of less, except there obviously was a lot of hype around the halving, and that certainly could be again about next halving. So it could still be a catalyst. But it seems to me like I cannot imagine now the next 2 years, basically until next halving, that we're just going to have like kind of bear market conditions. I would expect again for this demand to slowly pick up, and basically the start of a new cycle, as you can see in this chart. So I still expect to make some new all-time highs, maybe later this year. It can perhaps be at the end of this year, and certainly in 2023. I wouldn't rule that out. It can take a year for this to build up. But it kind of seems to me that we're at a low, and that we're slowly picking up again the start of a new cycle, which to me is very bullish.
Sam, I want to pass it to you, man.
No, I love this idea. I've been trying to wrap my head around for a long time, only a few data points in terms of where the cycles have been. And obviously, Q1 was a big way to see during this macro uncertainty that kind of cycle that we've seen before. And when you look at cycle multiples, that's getting more diminished in time, whether it's lengthening or whether we're going through a lot more of these kind of mini cycles where we get this less volatility on the upside, but also lower volatility on the downside. So it seems to be the first of its kind that's playing out, and kind of expect to see a lot more of those maybe smaller style cycles in here play out as the asset gets more institutionalized, more capital's flowing in, volatility is just muted anyway. But then again, at the end of it, there's this S-curve adoption that we're just taking part in the very beginning stages of. If you're thinking that Bitcoin is 2 to 3% of the adoption of the population. So in my framework, I'm using that S-curve adoption, that kind of exponential S-curve trend that we've seen with internet and with smartphones, and kind of watching that speed up, and assuming that Bitcoin has to go through that type of phase too, which whether it's this time around in 2 years where we see that type of explosive exponential move, or kind of maybe 2 years, 4 years from now, it's hard to tell when and where we're in that adoption curve and how fast it's going to move. But no, I love this chart from Root.
Yeah, thank you. So it also, it depends, on the definition of cycle a lot. People use a cycle all the time. But you can measure from different points. You can measure from halving to halving. Now I'm kind of looking at like a supply dynamic cycle basically within Bitcoin. So there's different definitions for cycle which make it very confusing. So still from halving to halving, you could look at this from from a lengthening cycle perspective, right? Like we could get a top next year or something, or a new all-time high next year, let's say. Then it would be perfectly a lengthening cycle if your definition is cycle from halving to halving, right? So it very much depends on this, but underneath all this, these dynamics are going on, and we can see them on chain, and I think they're very interesting to look at. And so it's a bit of a different definition of cycle that we use here. But yeah, I think these supply dynamics are very interesting to see play out, and so yeah, I'm very bullish for the next 2 years, to be honest.
Y'all, we've been going for about an hour here. I think it's getting about time that we wrap it up. Want to go into kind of last words. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to share, Sam, or if we can just kind of go to closing thoughts here.
No, let's go to closing thoughts. Sounds good.
So I guess, yeah, I mean, if you were to summarize what you're seeing, what you're talking about on the deep dive, maybe what you're dropping later today, what would you tell the Bitcoiners listening?
Yeah, definitely. So from my point of view, I'm more leaning, macro, concerned, uncertain, bearish, however you want to call it, slightly kind of gray area over the short term, next few months. I think there's some incredible fundamentals within Bitcoin. From when you look at the on-chain perspective and you look at kind of this lower dampening of derivatives right now. So very bullish from that perspective, kind of more long-term, still cautious in the short term over the next 3 months. Would love to see how Bitcoin responds to equities over the next few months. And then also look at kind of this divergence or decoupling that everyone's always talking about, and hoping that we see more of that as a standalone asset over the next year. What we're dropping today is probably some extension of these charts, looking at just cycle top bottom indicators for on-chain, which lean a little bit neutral to bullish right now from, over looking at 20 different ones. So probably talk about through some of those. So yeah, if you're curious, check out the link in my bio, sign up for a free subscription to Deep Dive if you don't have it. If not, we'll be sending it out pretty soon.
Root.
Yeah, so I think I kind of summarized, or several times I got back to kind of similar conclusions over several charts that we looked at. So I think my perspective is kind of clear. In general, this macro bottom is likely in. We will see some choppy price behavior in between 47K and 36K, in my opinion. Those are the most likely things. We can obviously go lower with the uncertainty with the macro conditions, but I still, Bitcoin is actually the risk-off asset, and it's what most people still don't understand, which is why it's seen still as a risk-on asset. But I also think that at some point we will deviate from that. It might still take some time. I'm actually very bullish on Bitcoin in the next years. I think 100K is really nothing. But I look more at macro. I'm not a day trader. I like to look at macro trends within Bitcoin more than just on the short term. So if I say like likely the bottom is in, that does not mean that we cannot drop a few thousand from here. I think that's totally normal. But any price level in these ranges, 36, and between current price, if you think 2 years into the future, and I would expect very likely to be above 100K, then these are perfect entry points. And we've seen in some of the charts today that many on-chain indicators kind of signal that a bottom, that we've been in kind of a macro bottom, that we're still in quite an opportunity for buying. And so I think that is very bullish. And yeah, I hope to come next week or so with some more some exciting news. So a model I've been working on for some time, also a macro trend within Bitcoin. And so sure, check out my my Twitter profile. Follow me on Twitter, and you know, make sure you keep up with you follow these updates.
Awesome. Well, Sam, Root, this was a great show. Really appreciate y'all walking us through what is happening with Bitcoin's price, being pretty honest and somber about the uncertainty that's ahead of us. There's only one thing that's certain for me, and that is that the Bitcoin 22 conference is going to be absolutely sick. We're going to be throwing a motherfucking music festival at the end. We're going to be hosting people like Jordan Peterson, President Bukele, Michael Saylor, and many more incredible people. So go check out the Bitcoin conference, b.tc/conference, and go get your ticket. I think we have a promo code YTMAG. So that's YTMAG, and that saves you 10% off. And if you pay in Bitcoin, you save even more. So stack the code with paying in Bitcoin and maximize your savings. You're not going to want to miss the Bitcoin conference in Miami. Is going to be absolutely incredible. All right. I think we can wrap this one up. Chris, I don't know if you want to run a commercial, and everyone on Spaces, thanks for joining. Peace.